Chapter 693. Looking at the rampaging Nami with interest, Dustless couldn't help but look at her in a new light. The fear in her eyes was clearly visible, but she still rushed over without hesitation. In the past, Nami was always evading and escaping from reality. Now her performance made people's eyes light up. Although this performance was extremely brainless in Wu Chen's eyes, it could be seen that she still cherished her companions. His eyebrows were slightly raised and a ripple visible to the naked eye spread out. This magical energy is boundless, spreading rapidly. There is no boundary. It is mysterious and has no substance, but it is real. With Wu Chen as the center, it spreads around and easily covers and swallows Nami, who is unaware of it. In the face of Haoshiku Haki, these young chicks couldn't fight back at all. Nami's hair stood up and she looked at the expressionless Dustless with a slightly dazed look in horror. She instinctively retreated, and some mysterious unknown force invaded her mind. Her spiritual world seemed to be struck by lightning and she lost her mind for a moment. Her body swayed from side to side in a daze, like a candle in the wind, and she lost control. "What did you do to Nami, you bastard?" Luffy, who realized something was wrong, asked anxiously. "Don't worry, she was just stunned by Haki." With his hands in each other's sleeves, Dustless explained, "My partner was beaten to a pulp. I just thought it would be better if she didn't see it so as not to leave a psychological shadow. I am the only one in the marine so far." Dustless smiled and his tone was half joking and half serious. "And her vitality is really strong, but you should be like her, lying on the ground and sleeping is more appropriate." Turning his head, Dustless noticed that Zoro and Sanji showed signs of recovery, and the same throbbing appeared in his eyes again. A ripple visible to the naked eye, but a mysterious energy fluctuation that could not be touched spread. The two people who were affected by it trembled and fainted again. This mysterious power was domineering and awe-inspiring. Just touching it would cause one's soul to tremble. Luffy looked at the scene in front of him with a dumbfounded expression. He raised his arms subconsciously and could clearly see the hair on the surface of his skin trembling uncontrollably. He knew that this was the case when Dustless deliberately let him go. Otherwise he may end up like Zoro, Sanji and others. 10,000 Mammoth Heavenly Attraction. With a shout, a formless ripple enveloped Luffy. He was startled to find that he had lost his balance and was sent flying. He looked up and saw that a black hole had appeared in Dustless's palm. Rubber pistol. With the help of gravity, Luffy's arm elongated without limit and almost instantly smashed into Dustless's face. "Damn it, it hurts, it hurts." Looking in the direction of the sound, the one who cried out in pain was not Dustless but Luffy. "It is said that armament Haki is the natural enemy of your ability. It seems that you still don't understand what it means." Dustless felt helpless towards Luffy's one-track mind. Only he was so eccentric. Light speed kick. The moment Luffy approached Dustless, the flash of light burst out all over his body, and the fierce beam of destruction eroded and swallowed him. Boom boom boom. Flames soared into the air, the ground trembled and a large pit was clearly visible. Luffy was lying in it, his eyes were white and he had lost his fighting consciousness. Undead Cockroach finally lay down. Dustless breathed a sigh of relief. With his palm facing the direction of Arlong, his body suddenly ignored the existence of gravity and floated strangely towards Dustless. Just as he was about to pull away, Straw Hat Luffy stood up and slapped his face again. "This guy? I have to beat him until he only has half a life left." Dustless was extremely speechless. He glanced at Luffy behind him from the corner of his eyes and couldn't help but sigh. In the next second his whole body turned into an afterimage and lost its texture. Boom. The fist covered with armament Haki mercilessly smashed into Luffy's lungs, and the force was fierce and strong. Puff. Suffering a fatal blow, Luffy's pupils widened, and his body couldn't help but step back a few steps in succession. His chest was surging and rolling and white saliva was uncontrollably spat out. Finally he couldn't bear the burden and knelt on the ground, his hands supporting the ground, not letting himself kneel again. "Your courage is commendable." Dustless nodded and praised and sincerely admired Luffy's amazing willpower. Then he looked cold and said indifferently, "But the behavior is really stupid." After that, Dustless kicked out ruthlessly. Boom boom boom, reaching Dustless's world-shocking realm, even the slightest attack would cause an unimaginable commotion and destruction. However, this kick was not covered with armament hockey. Otherwise, Luffy might have fallen. Why didn't you catch me? Dustless passed by Luffy and used the last of his strength to open his eyes. Luffy's tone was like a man in his twilight years, revealing the exhaustion deep into his soul. Do you think you have the value of being caught by me? Dustless didn't answer and asked. So that's how it is. Maybe it's not worth enough. Luffy laughed at himself. His eyes restored light, and it seemed that he wanted to remember Dustless's face forever and keep it in his heart. His mouth squirmed and he wanted to speak again, but his bad physical condition made him swallow back his words. So live well, your future performance is worth looking forward to. Glancing at Luffy, Dustless's body turned into a gust of wind, and with the complete sunset of the sun, he disappeared into the dark night sky. Killing Luffy is worthless, but letting him live can better disturb the world. The more chaotic it is, the more thoroughly Dustless can take the opportunity to fish in troubled waters. He and the world government and the marine headquarters are all seemingly united, but at the same time they are all different. Chapter 694. Dustless looked at the fainted Straw Hat pirates with a smile on his face. Only by giving these kids pressure can they feel the pressure, so they can work harder to enhance their strength and have stronger strength to help Dustless destroy the world. Staring at Luffy's sleeping face, Dustless couldn't help but feel a little sympathy for him. First he was used by Shanks to defeat himself, and then he was used by Dustless to destroy the world. This is the sorrow of ants, they can only go with the flow, and they don't even have the qualifications to know the truth. A few days later on the blue sea, Dustless walked alone. The shadow in the distance was clearly visible, and the tall building rose from the ground, like a pole gun standing on the sea, extraordinarily spectacular and majestic. Looking closely, it is Impel Down. Your luck is really good. You entered Impel Down several times and finally you were released. Dustless stared at the floating fishman Arlong. This guy was locked in Impel Down before, but he was bailed out because Jinbe joined the 7 warlords of the sea, and his life was quite happy. With the support of the 7 warlords of the sea, it was enough for him to be lawless. Hey, this time I will be released again, haha. The fishman Arlong laughed wildly. In his early years he had joined the Sun Pirates, so he had a close relationship with the Knight of the Sea Jinbe. When Fisher Tiger invaded Mariehua to release slaves, the fishman Arlong was arrested by Dustless and joined Impel Down, but later he was bailed out because Jinbe joined the 7 warlords of the sea. This time you will never be released. Glancing faintly at the merman Along, who was full of smiles, Wu Chen's tone was resolute and decisive. Why? Hearing this, the fishman Arlong was stunned and immediately asked, puzzled. Why? The reason is very simple. Staring at the sky in the distance, Dustless whispered, there is no extra reason, just because you were caught by me. Is this explanation enough? His calm face remained as calm as an ancient well. He was like a stone without any extra expression. Well, I have a backer. I'm different from the pirates you caught before. Arlong roared loudly, his tone full of confidence. There are only 2 endings for pirates caught by Dustless. One is to be killed on the spot, and the other is to be locked in the dark Impel Down forever, but he is different. Jinbe boss will definitely bail me out. Arlong raised his head and proudly promised Dustless. Hearing this, Dustless looked at the fishman Arlong and his eyes flashed with disapproval. As a Shichibukai, Jinbe can bail out many pirates, but if he wants to release the pirates caught by Dustless, it is tantamount to daydreaming. Shichibukai, as special ability, only works on ordinary people. Sorry, I'm not within their rules and their child's privilege can't bind me. Dustless replied with a blank expression and his tone was unshakable. Even if Jinbe was able to bail out the fishman Arlong, it was also the result of Dustless's nod. Otherwise the fishman Arlong's head would have been removed. Then with a wave of his finger the tied fishman Arlong floated up. On the endless sea, the 2 men walked together to Impel Down and soon disappeared into the clouds. As soon as he stepped into Impel Down, an uninvited guest with blue skin appeared in Dustless's pupils. Looking up, it was one of the Shichibukai, Knight of the Sea Jinbe. Oh, you're quite well informed. Looking at Jinbe, Dustless said. It was only a few days before and after the news. Jinbe had already known the news, and it was obvious that he had been waiting for a long time. Someone must have tipped him off. It's none of your business. With a snort, Jinbe said coldly. Looking at the fishman Arlong who was scorched and full of various wounds, Jinbi's brow wrinkled tightly together, and his eyes flashed with displeasure and hostility. He immediately looked at Dustless, and the disgust in the depths of his eyes disappeared in a flash. The person he didn't want to see the most in his life was this guy, no one else. According to the agreement when I became the Shichibukai, I can bail out my men. Now I ask you to let him go. Arlong is my subordinate. Taking a deep breath, Jinbi shouted. If it wasn't for the situation, he really didn't want to deal with people like Dustless, ruthless, strong and unfathomable. In all fairness, being in the same space with Dustless, Jinbi will feel a sense of oppression that he has never felt before, like an invisible heavy mountain. Let him go? I'm going to say no. Touching his chin, Dustless said playfully. Jinbi heard this, his breathing suddenly became heavy, and he stared at Dustless gloomily, and the murderous intent made the air around him begin to cool down. Filled with cold murderous intent, Dustless's expression remained unchanged, and he still looked at him playfully. If you want to take this kid by brute force, I advise you to save it. The gap between you and me, I think you should understand, Jinbi. His expression suddenly stiffened. Even if he was unwilling, Jinbi still loosened his fist. As Dustless said, the gap is too big and it's tantamount to directly looking for death. This is the agreement between the government and the Shichibukai. I hope you don't breach it. Even so, he still refused to lower his posture and took out the world government, hoping that Dustless would step back. Unfortunately, he was destined to be disappointed. Funny, Jinbi, don't you know who I am? You should have seen me in the past. To some extent, I can represent the government. Chapter 695. Jinbi felt deeply helpless. He didn't know where to start. Not only was there a huge gap in strength between them, but his identity was also exaggerated and shocking. The fishman has not even been recognized by the world government. It is a lower class of people. It is a creature with no human rights. Hey, don't forget the original government agreement. Even if I withdraw from the organization, you can't say anything. Jinbi threatened without showing weakness. It's just that law is full of confidence in Dustless's eyes. Threatening me, hee. I like hard bones the most, Jinbi. Dustless, who was deeply bored, was interested in Jinbi's words, and there was a cynical smile on the corner of his mouth. In fact, you can withdraw from the organization. If you think the Fishman Island can afford this price, you can try. Dustless stared at Jinbi calmly, and he also threatened. How can you be so despicable? The anger in his eyes, Jinbi's fist was clenched again. He is also a veteran of the sea for many years. Naturally, he heard the meaning of Dustless's words. This is a disguised threat. Maybe as long as he withdraws from the Shichibukai, the entire Fishman Island will be devastated. You bastard are so shameless, Jinbi boss, kill him. The fishman Arlong was not an idiot and immediately shouted hysterically at Jinbi. Idiot, you haven't even read the situation. The cold eyes locked on the fishman Arlong, Dustless's eyes turned cold, and the strange energy fluctuations instantly swallowed the fishman Arlong. The pupils that were still shining suddenly turned and then he fainted. What a superb haoshiku haki. Jinbi's face was ugly. This moment of haoshiku, even Jinbi was a little affected, and his whole body trembled uncontrollably. Even though he had been through hundreds of battles, he couldn't help but feel fear and panic in his heart. This profound haoshiku haki, he can only think of two people, Whitebeard and Red Hair Shanks. Perhaps these two legendary figures can barely compete with Dustless. Looking at Arlong, who was rolling his eyes on the ground, Jinbi's heart was filled with anger and his fists were clenched. Actually, I can also let him go, and at the same time I can also let your fishman race live safely in the air. With my power and special status I can do this. Of course, there is no free lunch in this world. All of these promises have conditions. Like a ray of light in the darkness, Dustless's words suddenly made Jinbi see hope again. Jinbi choked with sobs and his eyes were obviously filled with desire. He knew that Dustless was telling the truth, and with his status, there was no need to lie to Jinbi. With Dustless's status, Dustless could easily do it. What are your conditions? Jinbei's hesitant eyes finally turned into determination, and his voice even trembled. This is very simple, it depends on how you choose, it's completely up to you, Jinbi. Dustless's face swept a mysterious smile, and then the corner of his mouth was close to Jinbi's ear. After a while, Jinbi's face changed greatly, and his hopeful look was replaced by anger and killing intent. He gasped for breath. He didn't expect Dustless's conditions to be so absurd. Are you kidding me? You want me to plot against Whitebeard's father? Jinbi shouted angrily while suppressing the anger in his heart. His words were fierce, and he couldn't wait to tear Dustless into pieces and then throw them into the sea to feed the fish. Dustless actually said such absurd conditions. Kidding? Of course I'm serious. Otherwise, what do you think you can get my bail without doing anything? You're too naive, Jinbi. Dustless heard this and said very seriously. Jinbi and Whitebeard's relationship is not shallow, even compared to the group of sons. If he attacks Whitebeard, the effect will be beyond imagination. Even if Whitebeard doesn't die, it won't be good. If I were you, I would agree to this condition. Whitebeard used to shelter the Fishman Island for other purposes. As a pirate, you must know how cunning Whitebeard is. This business is worth it. If you agree, the Fishman Island will be able to see the light of day again in the future. As for refusing, oh, you also understand. Dustless's mouth had a playful smile. Jinbi's pupils flickered, and he began to calculate the gains and losses in his heart, making a difficult choice. There is no doubt that as long as there is Dustless's approval, the fishmen can live a normal life like human beings in the future. They no longer have to live under the deep sea, and they will always be accompanied by darkness and coldness. However, Jinbi can't agree to Dustless's conditions. No matter what the purpose is, Dustless has sheltered the Fishman Island for several years. This is a fact. Sorry, I refuse your conditions. With a cold look, Jinbi decisively refused Dustless. Staring at Dustless's eyes, Jinbi said without fear, I can't do such a crazy thing. Even if you hold a knife on my neck, I can't raise a butcher's knife to Whitebeard. Jinbi said in a righteous tone, his voice filled with determination and without regret. No, you're wrong, Jinbi, you will agree. Dustless's face was full of darkness, and his eyes were full of strange black light, which was frightening. The flames burning in his eyes were enough to swallow and burn the whole world. No matter who it is, they can't escape the control of Dustless. Your 7 warlords of the sea can appear. This is an inevitable product under my control. In fact, it's just a chess piece that I took advantage of. Do you think you have the right to choose? Don't dream. From beginning to end, you are all chess pieces. Chapter 696. Jinbi's face was full of anger as he trembled with anger. Dustless's words seemed to be a silent statement. Their so-called shichibukai is just a bug that they play with at will without the slightest right to choose. They can only go with the flow and will only be cruelly suppressed if they want to resist. I didn't intend to fight against the government, but you forced me to do this. Staring at Dustless fiercely, Jinbi couldn't stand it and chose to resist by force. Dustless was so arrogant and unreasonable, and the cruel conditions made it difficult for him to accept. He suddenly felt that compared to Dustless, Sengoku and Marine Zakainu is too kind. Look at you, you want to fight. You should know the gap between us. Any resistance is useless. Dustless's eyebrows rose slightly and he saw through Jinbi's intention. You and I have fought before and you know the result. Struggle is futile. Only if you agree to my conditions the Fishman Island will be saved. You want me to attack Whitebeard-senpai? Dream on. Jinbi said decisively, his firm tone showed no regrets. Hearing this, Dustless's eyes gradually dimmed, and his expression became colder and colder. God sprinkles the rain of wisdom to the world and you covered it with an umbrella. Idiot move. The moment his voice fell, Dustless rushed out like a storm, rolling up a burst of choking dust, and even because the speed was too fierce, it strangely brought a gust of wind. It came crashing down like crushing dry weeds. I'm not the same as I was before. Seeing Dustless rushing over so exaggeratedly, Jinbi also reacted immediately. It's not his style to wait for death, and a drop of water suddenly appeared in his hand. Drink. With a low shout from Jinbi, the tiny water droplet in his hand instantly magnified countless times and turned into a giant water ball, which looked quite powerful. Fishman empty-handed, he. As Jinbi's voice fell, a strong shock wave came head-on, and the power was unimaginable, and even the soil buried deep in the ground was scraped out again. It's just an insignificant trick. What's the point? Seeing this, Dustless did not show any signs of slowing down. Instead, he increased his speed without limit. With a sharp whistling sound, he charged forward, completely ignoring the strong impact coming at him. Your trick can only tickle me, Jinbi. Your expression doesn't mean anything. Dustless frowned slightly and said with a slightly displeased tone. Following his line of sight, he saw Jinbi with a smug smile, giving people a feeling that his conspiracy had succeeded. If you're just putting on an act. You're just a blockhead who won't cry until you see the coffin. Dustless's face was replaced by an awe-inspiring color. A shining light appeared in his hand, and the tip of his thumb pointed at Jinbi, and then condensed extremely dense photons. Lasers. The light beam shot out from Dustless's hand and was about to swallow Jinbi, but he calmly avoided it. No wonder you're so confident. Over the years your observation hockey has improved a lot. It's estimated that your armament hockey is also the same. Dustless nodded slightly and then his eyes were replaced by ridicule. But what do you think is the use of armament hockey and observation hockey? In the face of absolute strength, no ability can play a role. My means to deal with you are not these. Jinbi shook his head resolutely and his eyes glowed with a bright light. The thread of conversation suddenly turned and Jinbi said, "This old man is a fishman and you are a devil fruit user. This is your biggest disadvantage." Disadvantage? It seemed that he was shocked by the boring joke. Dustless's invincible offensive suddenly stopped and asked curiously, "You think you can defeat me just because you are a fishman? This is funny enough. Is it possible that you fishmen are the illegitimate children of the goddess of luck?" Dustless sneered. You'll understand what I mean immediately." After glancing at Dustless fiercely, Jinbi simply jumped into the sea and disappeared completely. The surface of the water only bubbled and disappeared. Dustless knew that Jinbi did not run away, but was brewing something on the bottom of the sea. The whole sea began to throb and tremble. "I thought it would be some grand script. What's the use of such an old trick? There are always exceptions to everything. This trick might be fatal to other ability users, but it's useless to me." With a disappointed sigh, Dustless stood motionless and he had already guessed what Jinbi's attack was. Boom! The sea trembled and countless super-large water columns rose from the ground, condensing into a majestic water dragon that reached 10 or 20 meters high, which was quite scary. You are an ability user, no matter what type of ability you have. The sea is your natural enemy. Jinbi's voice was strong and he roared as if victory was in his grasp. 2 words. Glancing at him, Dustless contemptuously said, "Idiot." Jinbi looked colder and his big hand fell and the roaring water column in the sky fell to the ground, and the clean land became a mess and turned into an endless sea. Are you kidding me? How can he be okay after being eroded by the sea? The relieved smile on the corner of his mouth stiffened, and Jinbi rubbed his eyes to make sure that he wasn't dizzy. Because he was too excited, his voice was as sharp as metal. This strange scene was unforgettable for Jinbi. Dustless not only didn't feel like he had met a natural enemy, but he was like a fish swimming in the sea, with a face full of comfort and enjoyment. What made Jinbi angry the most was that in the sea, Dustless elegantly swayed his body. His agile appearance was even more vigorous than that of a fishman. Chapter 697. Wuxian swam vigorously in the water. His elegant posture made Jinbi's old face twitch. In his heart he cursed. If it weren't for the years of suffering, his shrewdness would have been practiced to the point of perfection. Otherwise he would have already spat out blood. Even so, Jinbi was still trembling. He felt darkness in front of him. The world in front of him was full of despair. Wu Chen's cheerful wandering posture was mocking his powerlessness in disguise. The trick he had painstakingly thought about for many years became a joke in an instant. Jinbi's inner thoughts were complex and he had no words to express his bitterness. "Didn't I tell you before, Jinbi?" When Jinbi's old face was black, Dustless's voice suddenly sounded. The voice was very soft and there was no ridicule in it. He said lightly, "Everything has an exception and I am exactly that exception. Even if I have the devil fruit, I am immune to seawater. No, it stands to reason that I am immune to any ability in this world." The seawater that he painstakingly gathered dissipated, and Dustless also came into view. Jinbi's eyes widened, and he naively thought that Dustless would show signs of dehydration. Unfortunately, his wish was destined to fail. Dustless came into view. His face was rosy, his skin was clean and lustrous, and his clothes were dried. He looked healthy and lively. "I wanted to make you happy." Oh, sorry, it seems that my humanized service has backfired. Dustless said helplessly, I wanted to deliberately reveal a flaw to make you happy for a while. After all, it would be unfair for you to fight for so many years. Dustless said with a sincere face, but in Jinbi's eyes, it was particularly harsh. If you can kill me in seconds, just do it. How is that possible? Jinbi's sarcastic voice hasn't fallen yet when Dustless appeared in front of him like a shadow, ignoring the definition of the word distance. Nothing is impossible. In your eyes it's so close, but in my eyes it's just close. The demonic whisper sounded in Jinbi's ears, and then he saw Dustless staring at him coldly. His leg condensed a dazzling light and immediately whistled mercilessly. Lightspeed kick. Jinbi, who didn't have time to react, was directly swallowed by the golden light, setting off an endless explosion, and immediately followed by an endless impact, like a hurricane raging in the blink of an eye. The blazing heat waves were like the waves of the sea, spreading out in an unstoppable manner. Even the ground was scorched yellow and corroded beyond recognition. You've learned a lot, Jinbi. His calm eyes spread some ripples. Dustless's tone had a little appreciation. Although Jinbi's body had been scorched by the high temperature caused by the lightspeed kick, he was still strong and straight like a javelin. Didn't you want to kill me? It seems that you're going to be disappointed. Jinbi looked at him coldly and mocked him mercilessly. It seems that only in this way can he pick up his destroyed self-esteem. Worthy of being one of the 7 warlords of the sea, your strength is really extraordinary. Dustless said with a little emotion, and then the corner of his mouth swept into a smile. Instant kill. If I let you fight directly, what fun would there be? In addition, you don't have to force yourself, you know your current physical condition, Jinbi. Looking at Jinbi's abdomen, there was a clear trace of depression, only a millimeter away from the position of the heart. As long as a little force is applied, Jinbi's heart will be hit hard. Obviously, Dustless did it deliberately. Even if the kick didn't kill him, Jinbi's body was trembling, like a willow branch in a storm, and the whole person felt particularly weak. Don't talk nonsense. Hearing this, Jinbi directly refuted Dustless and forcibly supported his body and turned into a cannonball roaring out. When Dustless saw this, he looked indifferent and his footsteps moved inch by inch. The speed was extremely fast, and Jinbi, who couldn't be seen by the naked eye, was clearly seen in his eyes. The power of the fishman is amazing, and Jinbi is no exception. The power condensed in his hand is enough to easily defeat a marine battleship. This kind of pure power attack, if you want to break my defense, it's 1,000 miles away. With both hands hugging the sky, ripples appeared in the bottom of his eyes. Wu Chen's dry lips opened slightly. Shinra Tensei. The moment Jinbi touched Dustless, the irresistible repulsion came head-on. His face suddenly changed. Being blocked by this tyrannical force, Jinbi instantly flew out powerlessly. The small mountain in the distance also trembled. Your efforts to never give up are commendable, but don't you think it's stupid and ridiculous to think that you can transcend the mortal world with your efforts, Jinbi? As Wu Chen's voice fell, he turned into a gust of wind and drifted out rapidly. In the void, the looming figure was mysterious. It was obviously close at hand, but it gave people a feeling that it was far away and untouchable. In the blink of an eye, he fell beside Jinbi. Let me go. Jinbi struggled and used all his strength to shake his body, trying to break free from the shackles of Wu Chen. Looking at him, he has been choked by Wu Chen's throat and was lifted in the air without any power to fight back. Jinbi's face was full of shame, and he stared at Dustless with indignant eyes. His eyes were as sharp as a knife, enough to cut people into pieces. Don't stare at me so fiercely. I gave you a chance to choose before, but you abandoned it. What? Do you want to go back on your words now? Wu Chen said with an expression that had nothing to do with him. How about? Now are you tempted by my conditions? Go assassinate that old guy Whitebeard, and if you succeed, you and the Fishman Island will live comfortably in the future. Chapter 698. At night, because everyone had played to their heart's content during the day, it was very quiet at night. Dustless couldn't sleep. After eating the octopus, he was very excited. At this time he sat on the beach and looked at the full moon. He couldn't help but feel a little distressed. At this time he heard a familiar mature voice behind him. Hey, don't you need to sleep? Jetta came to his side and a hint of a smile appeared in his eyes. After Dustless heard this, he snorted, rolled his eyes and said with a speechless face, "Aren't you also not sleeping? You should be thinking about how to go down, right?" Yi Jiansuk nodded and scratched his head in distress. He sighed helplessly and said, "Yeah, this damned place is really hard to get down. We need to make a barrier so that everyone can get down." After Dustless heard this, he said, "That's not a problem, but it's not necessarily a problem for me to go down alone." Yi Jianjie said. Yi Jianjie was speechless. He rolled his eyes and said, "Isn't this guy's words the same as if he didn't say anything?" As soon as he said this, he heard a voice immediately after. Only to hear a girl's voice, "Maybe I can do it." After the words were said, Noelle, who didn't show up much, came to the side of the two wearing a beautiful and slightly reserved swimsuit and a jacket. Noelle's face was slightly red, then she looked at the two's eyes, snorted, turned her head and said, "Don't think too much, I'm only helping you for the mission, you lowly people." She was embarrassed when she said this. Immediately the two of them burst out laughing. Then Noelle whispered, "It's not a problem if you want to go down, but give me 2 days to practice. I haven't tried to maintain it for so long." As soon as she said this, Dustless snorted and said, "Try to speed it up. If you can do it in 1 night, then do it. I'm going back to sleep." After saying this, he yawned and left. Noelle also knew that her master was impatient, so she was a little distressed. How could 1 night be enough? How could she maintain it for so long? It shouldn't be possible, right? At this time she hurriedly said to her leader Yi Jianjie, "Leader, how can 1 night of practice be enough? This won't work." Yi Jianjie yawned and scratched his head helplessly, then said, "Okay, you can do it, I'm going back to sleep." After he finished speaking, he let out a hearty laugh and turned around to leave. Noelle suddenly felt a little speechless. This guy was really... With this thought in mind, he slowly stood up and walked towards a pile of rocks. It was quieter and it was more suitable for using magic. Yi Jianjie, S's. After saying this, she quickly took out her magic book and said, "Come, water flow, water creation magic. Poseidon's water ball." After saying this, she immediately created a huge water ball. In front of her, her face immediately showed an excited expression. It was really great, she actually succeeded for the first time. At this time. But only a voice was heard, "No, you're here too." Just as he finished speaking, a strong young man, dragging a huge sword, came to Noelle's side. That was Ashta. Ashta came to Noelle's side, his face full of smiles. At this time, Noelle's face turned red and suddenly her magic dissipated, causing the water ball to scatter on the ground. She immediately turned her head and said in a panic, "What are you doing here? Didn't you go back to sleep?" Ashta quickly said, "Ah, no, I didn't go back to sleep. I'm still here training. Although that thing is really delicious, I think I must strengthen my training. Otherwise, how can it work?" After hearing this, Noelle nodded in a daze, took a deep breath and said, "I haven't been able to completely maintain the magic in my body." Just as he finished speaking, Asta immediately said, "Is that so? Why don't you try to relax a little more?" As soon as he said this, Noelle's eyes were filled with doubt. She sighed and said, "Well, I don't think it'll work." But at this time Ashta looked at Noelle seriously and said, "No, you can do it. I believe that with your talent and magic power you can do it. You can do it better than me. Look at me, a guy without magic power can become like this." After Noelle heard this, he was stunned. There was a hint of surprise in his eyes. He took a deep breath and said, "So it's like this. I'll work hard." After saying this, she suddenly showed a serious expression. Then he started to practice very hard. Ashta held an arrow and comprehended his swordsmanship. He knew that what he learned was not enough. He knew that the swordsmanship he displayed last time was far from enough. He was not strong enough. He deeply understood that in his heart, and he was far from being able to fully control his own power. Therefore at this moment he began to train even harder. Under the moonlight, a pair of people were training hard. Wuxian looked at all this from the side and felt a little gratified in his heart. These two guys had quite a tacit understanding. Thinking like this, he finally yawned and turned his head to sleep very sleepily. Just as he was about to go into sleep, he heard a voice, "Hey!" Wuxian looked up and saw Banosha, who was lying on the side. He blinked in a daze, the corner of his mouth slightly outlined, and said, "Oh, you're not asleep yet?" Banosha snorted, her face slightly blushed and said, "By the way, where did you go?" Dustless saw this woman's appearance and was stunned. He blinked his eyes. It was very strange. Chapter 699. At this point in the battle, Jinbi couldn't help but become angry. His face was red and his neck was thick. It's not that he's a stingy person, but Dustless is really hateful. Not to mention the foul language in his mouth makes people furious. Jinbi thought that his tolerance is comparable to the sea, but at this moment he was still annoyed by Dustless. His lungs were trembling. Jinbi even felt that his lungs were about to explode. I'm telling the truth. You look so scary, no one wants you. I'm afraid that even the Sea King may not dare to eat you, Jinbi. Dustless said very seriously. In the eyes of human beings, Jinbi is indeed not flattering. Die for this old man. Jinbi couldn't bear the ridicule, not because he's too narrow-minded, but because this guy in front of him is too hateful, specifically sprinkling salt on people's wounds. Water strike. Jinbi didn't talk nonsense. He waved his hand and condensed a few drops of strange water balls, completely ignoring the existence of gravity so strangely attached in front of him. This is one of the powerful tricks unique to the fishman race. This seemingly ordinary raindrop is actually very powerful. This kind of child's trick doesn't work on me, Jinbi. His eyes rotated rapidly and Wu Chen's eyes suddenly turned into 3 Tomo Sharingan, extremely strange, as deep and beautiful as a blood-red gem. The ripples in his eyes were like the ripples spreading on the surface of the water, with unimaginable power. In an instant, time and space seemed to be distorted by those strange eyes. The world in front of him seemed to be a mirror. The indescribable deep evil energy fluctuations made Jinbi's hair stand up. His whole soul was pierced. Whoosh! Throwing the fear and trembling in his heart, Jinbi swept out the water drops in his hand, with infinite power. The speed was as fast as lightning. It was difficult to catch the trajectory of the movement with the naked eye. Bang! 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 It seems that God suddenly stood on Jinbi's side. These powerful water drops all strangely hit Dustless's abdomen, smashing him out. Jinbi saw this scene and suddenly froze. To be honest, he just wanted to delay Dustless's attack. He didn't want to rely on this trivial trick to repel him. Jinbi's eyes were filled with awe. After many years of fighting, Jinbi knew that this opportunity will not come again, and Dustless's dark red blood stains on the corner of his mouth were obviously not pretending. It's just the result of Dustless's carelessness. Jinbi's body speed was raised to the limit. In just a short moment, Jinbi, like lightning, came in front of Dustless. His eyes were full of killing intent. Remembering the cruel treatment of Dustless, Jinbi's eyes turned scarlet, his arms and his hand into a fist. His strong muscles contained explosive power. Sharkwa's fist. The powerful fist, which was enough to destroy a small mountain, blasted toward Wu Chen's head without mercy. The ground, which couldn't bear this ferocious force, burst open in an instant, as fragile as paper scraps. Dustless's eyes turned white. Obviously, Jinbi's heavy blow had made him unconscious. However, this was just the beginning. Jinbi was not going to give up on such a rare opportunity. At the very least, he had to recoup all the suffering he had suffered before with interest. 7,000-watt roundhouse kick. His strong and powerful arm pulled Dustless up. Jinbi didn't intend to settle things peacefully. His hatred for Dustless was far more than that. 10 years ago, when invading Mariehua, he and his beloved big brother Fisher Tiger were crushed by Dustless with overwhelming strength. Now he wanted to take it back. Boom boom boom. With a powerful kick, Dustless flew out like a cannonball. A long and narrow ditch was formed on the ground, extending hundreds of meters away. Dustless was lying in the ditch weakly. I'm not done yet. Seeing this, Jinbi smiled cruelly, showing a bloodthirsty face. From beginning to end, he was a pirate. His tiger body suddenly shook and countless water droplets flowed out of his body and condensed in his palm. Unlike the previous water attack, this time it turned into an unprecedented big water ball. Fishman empty-handed's profounds Takeshi. With Jinbi's order, this huge and exaggerated water ball turned into an endless impact, which was not much different from a light wave without a physical body, and it swallowed Dustless in an instant. The dust on the surface of the ground was blown away by this impact, and fresh soil buried deep in the ground was simply exposed to the sun. On the other hand, Dustless was already bloody. This should be the end. Seeing that Dustless was not breathing, Jinbi wiped the sweat from his ears and breathed a sigh of relief. However, at this moment a sudden change occurred. Jinbi's spirit was in a trance, and the scene in front of his eyes was violently distorted, as if time and space were flowing backward, and he returned to the beginning. Dustless stood with his hands behind his back, and the corner of his mouth always had a calm smile, and the first impression he gave was elegant and indifferent. How is it possible? Was everything just a dream? Jinbi rubbed his eyes and he couldn't believe it. He glared at Wuxian. Wuxian was in perfect condition. His skin was clean and his clothes were intact. On the contrary, he was even flatter than her. Her spirit suffered an unprecedented blow. Unable to bear the burden, she fell to the ground. She didn't even have the strength to move her body. What you saw before was indeed a dream, a nightmare made by my Sharingan. Dustless said calmly. Everything Jinbi saw just now was an illusion created by Sharingan, and the reality was like this. Jinbi was completely exhausted and he didn't even have the strength to escape, let alone fight back. Chapter 700. Jinbi's face was as pale as paper, the bones in his body seemed to have been taken away. He fell to the ground powerlessly. He looked up at Dustless who was walking towards him. According to Dustless, it was all because of the mysterious eyes. Those eyes of yours. Is it because of him? Jinbi said with fear. Looking at the strange eyes, he had a sense of panic. There are such magical eyes in the world. No wonder you are so confident. In the end, you just deliberately want to see me make a fool of myself. Jinbi's tone was filled with self-mockery, loneliness and bleakness. He thought that even if he wasn't Dustless's opponent, he could at least struggle against him. He didn't expect such a ridiculous result in the end. He was like a clown being played around with. It seems that you finally understand the gap between us. Wuxian shook his head resolutely and then said softly, the mystery of Sharingan can't be seen by your mortal body. In fact, when this ability is activated at the beginning, for you who don't know it, you can easily kill it. Then why don't you use this ability? Is there any side effect? Jinbi asked with a little hope, just to get more useful information from Dustless's mouth. Dustless glanced at Jinbi. He also understood what he was thinking. I have already said before, if I kill you directly, it would be too unfair for you who have worked hard for many years, so I let you dance until now. In the marine, I am the only one who can be so humane. Himita. I think I don't need to say it, you know what the consequences will be. Dustless looked at Jinbi with a grateful expression. Jinbi frowned. He didn't comment on Dustless's words. Among the admirals of the marine, Akainu is indeed the most cruel and extreme admiral. Once caught by him, sometimes directly surrendering will also be cruelly burned to ashes by Akainu. Humph, don't even think about making me sneak attack Dustless. That kind of despicable and shameless thing, I can't do it. Jinbi said in annoyance as he remembered Dustless' purpose. The person he respected the most was Whitebeard. Dustless asked him to plot against Whitebeard. Jinbi's feelings could be imagined. Can't do it? It means that you're rejecting my conditions. That doesn't matter. I've already guessed it. Shrugging his shoulders, Wuxian didn't care. His next sentence sent Jinbi to the 18th floor of hell. However, it's not up to you to do it. You don't have the right to choose. As soon as his voice fell, without waiting for Jinbi to react, his Sharingan began to rotate rapidly. How could you have your way? At this moment, Jinbi suddenly opened his mouth and dense water droplets shot out of his mouth like a sharp sword, stabbing towards Dustless's eyes. The eyes of humans were the weakest and the weakest part of their body. Not only humans but all creatures are the same. I expected you to do this, but you don't know how to be quiet. Ken Susanoo. Chakra overflowed from his body, the golden light flashed and then condensed into human bones, protecting Dustless in it. The water droplets bombarded Susanoo's body like cannonballs, but the latter only trembled a little before sinking into the sea like a stone, forever disappearing without a trace, unable to shake it at all. What the hell is this? Jinbi's eyes widened in shock. The moment this terrifying energy fluctuation appeared, his body trembled uncontrollably in fear, and his eyes couldn't help but be filled with despair. Even the surface of his skin was covered with frost visible to the naked eye. As a veteran of the sea for many years, Jinbi naturally knew the extraordinariness of the mysterious trick in front of him. It was just a shadow, but it made him feel a kind of panic. And this weird golden defensive skeleton, anyone can see that it's only a part of the human hand, obviously not a complete state. However, even so, The exaggerated arm made Jinbi dazzled because it was so big that it was beyond imagination. Just the arm alone was more than 10 meters high. That's it. As a trophy you have no right to choose your own fate. Removing Qin Susanu from his body, Dustless's scarlet Sharingan once again floated energy fluctuations quite mysterious. For the indigenous people of this world, the mysterious energy of chakra is simply incomprehensible. Feeling the horror of those eyes, Jinbi instinctively closed his eyes, but it was too late. His eyes had turned into the same Sharingan as Dustless. It's really busy these days. Time flies. He didn't know how long it had been. Dustless sat on the stone without a care for his image, and his shining eyes gradually slackened. For the next few days he has been busy. He hasn't found a reasonable time to rest. Dustless, what about this kid? White Zetsu broke out of the ground and looked at the unconscious Jinbi and asked. As for the fishman Arlong, that kid is destined to be locked in Impel Down. Without Dustless's permission no one can bail him out, not even the Shichibukai. Don't worry about Jinbi. He has been under my genjutsu, just let him go. Dustless waved his hand indicating that he didn't need to care. He also counted on Jinbi to assassinate Whitebeard, and naturally, it was impossible for him to be caught or imprisoned by him. In this case the previous battle was bound to be in vain. White Zetsu was silent, but then he disappeared into the depths of the ground. This kind of thing doesn't need him and Dustless to worry about. Someone in Impel Down naturally knows what to do. Chapter 701. Time flies and a few days passed in a blink of an eye. Dustless returned to Mariehua in a daze. As the disguised body of the sacred tree, Dustless has inexhaustible physical strength and almost infinite spirit, but the physical and mental exhaustion is indescribable. After doing something for a long time, anyone will feel disgusted and weak. In particular, Dustless is not a diligent person. After returning to Mariehua he slept for a day and a night without saying anything. When he got up the next day it was almost noon. Seeing that Dustless finally regained consciousness from his sleep, Hancock came late to help him dress. Looking at the face of the lotus flower in front of him, Dustless suddenly realized that he had not worn clothes himself for about 10 years, and Hancock served Dustless in his daily life. It has not changed for decades. Unknowingly, Hancock has become an indispensable part of Dustless's daily life. Although Hancock is nearly 30 years old now, she is still a beauty. Her skin is as white as snow. Her natural but very strong body fragrance is irresistible. As long as you smell it, you will be lost in it forever and can't extricate yourself. The clean oval face is as delicate as porcelain, perfect and impeccable, and the shining beautiful eyes are as bright as stars. Hancock's graceful figure looks quite weak on the surface, but her whole body exudes an indescribable noble aura. Her temperament is elegant and noble, and it is filled with indescribable dominance. This little girl has become more and more mature in recent years, and her figure has become more and more attractive. It's really a sin. Shaking his head, Dustless couldn't help but shake his head and sigh. I am afraid that ordinary people will be swallowed and annihilated by her spring eyes if they look at Hancock. Dustless knows that this is not Hancock's fault, because the sweet fruit itself has charm. Young master, you are not young anymore. Why do you still live like a child? Hancock pouted and said with a little dissatisfaction. Looking closely he saw Dustless twisting his body like a child as if he was in pain. I'm really not used to wearing this kind of celestial dragon clothes. I'll just change into a set of casual clothes that I usually wear, Dustless said unhappily. Dustless Celestial's etiquette was heavy, and all aspects were extremely particular, including dressing. For Celestial Dragon's clothes, Dustless felt uncomfortable wearing them. No, otherwise Mariehua and those scumbags will say that you are an alien. Hancock's face was stern and her tone was firm, leaving no room for retreat. Wuchen was slightly stunned. He looked at the dissatisfied Hancock with a slightly surprised look. Her appearance made people's eyes light up. They're just a bunch of trash living under the glory of their ancestors. There's no need to pay attention to them. Dustless waved his hand and said indifferently. Over the years, Dustless has been regarded as the biggest alien and monster among celestial dragons. Most celestial dragons are afraid of Dustless's unprecedented strength and dare not speak out. They can only talk about him behind his back. Dustless doesn't care about this. It's easy to block a person's mouth, but it's difficult to block a person's heart. Anyway, it won't last long and sooner or later it will be eliminated by the law of the jungle. By the way, where did the little girl Yueshi go? She used to be very happy. Frowning slightly, Dustless asked. Yueshi used to come to Dustless early in the morning, taking him to walk around and teasing some celestial dragons who didn't open their eyes. Miss went to bed at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning last night, and now she's still in bed. Hancock said helplessly. The father and daughter are the kind of people who like to stay in bed. Hey, this is really a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Hearing this, Dustless smiled happily, but in Hancock's ears, it was particularly gloomy. Go and find me a set of suitable clothes. The clothes of celestial dragons are too bulky and not suitable for walking. Dustless, who was uncomfortable, said unhappily. No, master, that group of people will talk about you behind your back. Hancock still can't give in. For her now, Dustless is everything to Hancock. It is a shame to be degraded by the group of incompetent celestial dragons. Are you sure you don't want to take it? Dustless asked with a smile. Hancock nodded resolutely and still refused to give in. Gotcha. The violent chakra rushed out of the body. Dustless's celestial dragon's clothes were shattered in an instant, revealing strong and smooth skin. Master, you. Seeing this scene, Hancock couldn't help but be dumbfounded. Suddenly she felt her body was light and was hugged by Dustless. The hot breath of the man entered her ears and nose. Hancock's face was red, although she and Dustless were not the first time. Disobeying this, master, you must be punished. Dustless's face had a playful smile, and his eyes were particularly explicit, easily penetrating human clothes. Hancock was not a naive little girl. She already understood what Wuxian wanted to do. Her face turned red. She knew that it was still daytime. You are too cunning. It turned out to be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Hancock struggled with a red face, realizing that Dustless was deliberately like a turtle in a jar. Wuxian didn't care about this and just laughed it off. Appetite and lust were part of human nature. He was really stifled. This period of time, that brat Yushi had been making a ruckus all day long, causing him to not have a suitable opportunity to nourish himself. Now that Yushi was sleeping, such a rare opportunity, Wuxian naturally wouldn't let it go easily. Chakra erupted from the palm of his hand, and Hancock's clothes suddenly turned into debris. Chapter 702. Although there are essential differences between Dustless and other Tenryubito of Mariehua, they are still quite similar in some aspects, such as the aspect of women. Creak. The powerful force made the big bed creak. In the corridor there was a pleasant symphony, and because it was too intense, it gave people the illusion that the whole villa was swaying with it. This relaxing and intense battle only ended in the afternoon. Young master, you are too reckless. Hancock's face was red and pink charming dimples appeared on her face. After a long drought at this moment, she was like a bud waiting to bloom, beautiful and moving. She was like a peerless fairy, moving and tugging at people's heartstrings. The extinguished flame in Wu Chen's heart burst out again uncontrollably. Young master, Miss should have woken up. I'll serve her to dress. The shy Hancock quickly escaped. Wu Chen's eyes looked as if he wanted to swallow her, causing Hancock to be frightened. She hurriedly fled like a fox. Because of Dustless's abnormal physical strength, Hancock was devastated and walked unsteadily. This little girl, she is so charming. Opening the window and taking a breath, Dustless's heart calmed down and he stared at the blue sea in the distance. His heart began to wander, thinking about the current situation. The Straw Hat Pirates are now just young fledglings and can't be used. The New World's Yonko for Emperors has been quite quiet recently. Of course, because Dustless kidnapped Fire Fist Ace, the Whitebeard pirates have been on the verge of going berserk. Many pirates who had a grudge against Fire Fist Ace in the past were suppressed by Whitebeard in bloody means. Dustless Sama. Pure white broke out of the ground and White Zetsu came into sight. 7 warlords of the Sea Crocodile, recently investigating the underground palace of Alabasta. White Zetsu revealed the whereabouts of Crocodile. His tone was unprecedentedly dignified. This guy was an ambitious person. He was as dangerous as his nickname Sand Crocodile. He usually lurked quietly in the water. Once he launched an attack, it would be a fatal attack. In particular, Crocodile and Dustless still had a great grudge, and it could even be said that they would not rest until one of them was dead. He's too naive. What's the movement on the marine side? Sengoku has been paying attention to Crockett's movements and should have made a preparation plan. Dustless was very sure. A few years ago Sengoku had put Crocodile on the blacklist. Although he was a Shichibukai, Sengoku still treated him specially and secretly sent marine spies to monitor his every move. Dustless, as a high-level marine, also knew this. Crocodile is very scheming and terrible. The intelligent Sengoku naturally knows that he joined the Shichibukai for other purposes and has never been careless with Crocodile. Sengoku has noticed the relationship between Nico Robin and Crocodile. It seems that he has sent Kizaru over. White Zetsu said solemnly. He didn't sympathize with Crocodile. This guy was just a chess piece. Robin was actually Dustless's people. Once she was caught by Kizaru, the consequences would be unimaginable. Maybe Nico Robin will be killed directly. White Zetsu's tone was worried. Nico Robin was secretly arranged by Dustless for the Straw Hat Pirates. If she was killed by Kizaru, it means that everything done before may be in vain. Impossible. Sengoku will not kill Robin. It is estimated that he will let Robin secretly interpret the poneglyph and plot the location of the ancient weapon Pluton. Dustless instantly understood Sengoku's intentions. From the beginning, the world government has been chasing after the ancient weapons. If they can catch Nico Robin, they will not kill her but use her genius brain to find the trace of Pluton. But Robin is my people. It's not Kizaru Ronching's turn to point fingers. His eyes flashed with cold light. Dustless's tone was cold. The overall plan can't be changed because of Kizaru's sudden appearance. Even if he is a marine admiral, he is not qualified. It is reasonable to say that the subordinates of the Shichibukai can't be detained by the marine headquarters, but Nico Robin is a special case. There are too many things involved. It is worth Sengoku to take a risk. Even if the Gorosei knows, they won't blame Sengoku. Where Kizaru came from, we just need to drive him back. Thinking of Borsellino's wretched old face, Dustless had no good feelings. Dustless nodded in agreement. Robin is the hidden weapon of the Straw Hat Pirates in the future. She can't be captured by Kizaru. Crocodile can't resist an admiral. They can only rely on Dustless. Then again, Nico Robin is an important wanted criminal of the world government. Although the bounty is low, she is much more important than some pirates with bounties of hundreds of millions. Crocodile is careless. White Zetsu wondered. Crocodile is not an idiot. He knows the importance of Nico Robin. It is not reasonable for the Marines to find her. Do you think Crocodile did it intentionally? Dustless asked with a smile. Then he shook his head resolutely. His tone was magnetic and full of wisdom. No matter what Crocodile does, it doesn't matter. In the face of absolute strength, all conspiracies and tricks are reflections in the water. Crocodile is as cunning as a mouse, but in the face of Kizaru, any of his strategies are useless. Without the intervention of external forces, Robin will definitely be caught by Kizaru. Rumble. At this moment in the quiet room, the sound of the Den Den Mushi broke the quiet atmosphere. Looking up, the Den Den Mushi kept shouting, and even its expression was extremely cautious. Dustless's brows furrowed slightly but still walked over. Chapter 703. Wuxian strode forward with his head held high. There was a heroic spirit surging between his brows. Even though this world had been disrupted by him, some general events were still unavoidable. For example, the Alabastan incident is still the same as before. The only change is that the Marine Admiral Kizaru suddenly intervened. However, the distorted script only needs a little correction to return him to his original position. Long time no see, my Fleet Admiral. Without waiting for Sengoku to speak, Dustless joked. The person who contacted him using the Den Den Mushi was actually Fleet Admiral Sengoku. Sengoku, who was far away in Marin, was silent. He knew that Dustless was deliberately teasing him. He straightened out his thoughts and went straight to the point. Kizaru has rushed to Alabasta. I hope you can rush there too. Sorry, I don't have time. Without thinking, Dustless refused directly. Hearing this, Sengoku's eyes flashed with disappointment, and then he said to the Den Den Mushi, in that case, it's a pity, goodbye. As soon as his voice fell, without waiting for Dustless to reply, Sengoku hurriedly hung up the phone. This simple appearance made Dustless unable to react for a while, and he stood still like a stone. This guy is so free and easy for the first time. After a while, Dustless was surprised. When he refused other tasks before, Sengoku persuaded him. In Dustless's impression, Sengoku was the first time he was so straightforward. He didn't even bargain. Dustless frowned slightly. As the saying goes, there must be a demon if something is abnormal. Sengoku's behavior is so abnormal. There must be something wrong. Can't be as simple as it seems. Could it be that the old guy is testing me on purpose? Wuxian guessed with a shrewd look. This is the most likely. Sengoku is meticulous. The most terrible thing is not his strength but his intelligence. Sengoku is known as the wise general by the world. After a while, Dustless shook his head slightly. Only Hancock knew about his relationship with Nico Robin. Hancock naturally wouldn't betray Dustless. Gather all your clones in Alabasta. Tell me immediately if there's any trouble. Although he didn't know what Sengoku was planning, Dustless still asked White Zetsu's clones to scatter all over Alabasta. Even if Sengoku's conspiracy was flawless, it couldn't escape his eyes. Speaking of which, how is Crocodile's search for the Nether King? Dustless suddenly changed the topic and asked. Hearing this, White Zetsu shook his head and told him everything. Deciphering the poneglyph is not a trivial matter. It requires a lot of time. I don't think Crocodile has made any substantial progress. He is still playing games with the Alabastan royal family. White Zetsu's tone was contemptuous. Crocodile was much more timid than before. It was estimated that he was scared by Dustless, so he became extremely low-key. It didn't take long for him to deal with the Alabastan royal army. He sighed and felt some sympathy for Crocodile. It was because Mariehua was brutally suppressed by Dustless that a shadow was left in his heart. He began to tuck his tail between his legs and live in the dark day after day. Over the years he rarely heard any news about Crocodile. It's like he evaporated into thin air. All of this was thanks to Dustless. If he didn't deliberately distort Crocodile's mentality, maybe the kid would be happy to be a big thief now, and he wouldn't run to Alabasta, a country full of wind and sand. He even spent several years painstakingly gathering like-minded people from all sides, establishing a huge organization, and finally took the risk of collecting the devil child Nico Robin and looking for ancient weapons. White Zetsu knew that all of this was to retaliate against Dustless for the shame that Dustless gave him. You are a man-made product. Why are you sighing, White Zetsu? Glancing at White Zetsu, Dustless's plain face showed defeat. I didn't expect that the things I created would sympathize with the enemy. Nowadays the world is deteriorating. Dustless looked melancholy and emotional. I don't sympathize with him. I just pity Crocodile's naivety. White Zetsu shook his head. He knew Dustless well. Ancient weapons are legendary things. How can it be so easy to come out? In addition, if he really finds ancient weapons, I'm afraid that the effect will be unsatisfactory. It's unrealistic to expect Pluto to make a comeback. There was a sigh in his words and White Zetsu's face was full of pity. The outside world didn't know Dustless's secret at all. White Zetsu, who inherited part of Dustless's memory, knew that the master was unfathomable and powerful. If you have to find a creature that can defeat Dustless, only the legendary god. Crocodile, don't worry about him, he's just a pawn. Monkey D. Luffy can deal with him. It is estimated that after defeating Crocodile, Luffy's bounty will increase again. It's just enough to annoy that old man Garp. Dustless laughed gloatingly. As for that guy Kizaru, he wants to capture Robin to work for the government? Dream on. A bright golden luster floated all over his body. Although it was warm, it was full of indescribable heat and destruction. It was terrible, as if it could destroy everything in the world. Carefully feeling it, it was actually the ability of the glint fruit, but different from before. The power was different and there was a huge difference. Unlike Kizaru, Dustless's glint fruit had already reached the level of awakening. Chapter 704. In the cold and dark space, you can't even see your fingers and there's a deadly depression. Here it's several times more difficult to breathe fresh air than in other places. It's like a stone is stuck in your throat and there's a feeling of suffocation. Creak. At this moment the heavy metal door was easily pushed open by someone. This metal door that weighed several tons was like a toy. Immediately, a glaring light shone from outside the door. Endless cold fog drifted out of the metal door. Soon after, 3 figures came into view. Looking up, it was Dustless and White Zetsu. The other one was Caesar Kulong, who was responsible for helping Dustless build Pluto. I can't fight with Sengoku now, I can only find another way to make Kizaru go back home. Dustless didn't intend to do the task of stopping Kizaru himself. Long ago he planned for today and prepared a lot of cards. What he was about to use now was one of the cards he prepared. If one looked around, they would discover that this dark and gloomy space was actually a large laboratory. Countless strange creatures were being cultivated here. In the past, after witnessing Vegapunk's scientific achievements, Dustless ordered Caesar to pay more attention to the study of the human body. With his support over the years, Caesar has made rapid progress. Looking up, looking straight at the largest container in front of him, Dustless's eyes were filled with expectation, and his pace became a lot faster. The special pool was filled with a green solution and a floating man was clearly visible. He had long black hair, a handsome appearance, and there was no breath, no heartbeat, and it's not difficult to see that he's a dead man. However, even if his eyes were closed, his whole body exuded an indescribable temperament, and it was full of overbearingness. In front of him he felt as small and powerless as an ant. This person is Uchiha Madara. Although he used to control Madara's body to fight Blackbeard, and at that time he also fused with Dustless's cells. Although all aspects have recovered well, there are still flaws. All in all, at that time, it was just a last-minute preparation. Could it be that Lord Dustless wants to use Edo Tensei? White Zetsu muttered softly. Dustless resolutely shook his head when he heard this. He can use the Edo Tensei on anyone but Madara. This guy's ambition is monstrous. Even if he is dead, he is still a ghost. He longs to return from hell one day with an invincible posture and once again rule the world like a god. After pondering for a while, Dustless said resolutely, "Just make him into a heavenly axiom." In fact, Dustless still had the corpses of Hashirama and Tobirama. He could make them into one of the 6 paths, but thinking about Tsunade's feelings, he didn't want to do that. Tsunade was now treating him sincerely. If he turned her grandfather into a puppet, it would be too cruel. Besides, compared to Hashirama, Uchiha Madara wasn't bad. With a slight shift of thought, countless black iron rods appeared in his hands. This guy is my perfect test specimen. Do you want to ruin him like this? Looking at the iron rods in Dustless's hands, Caesar's face was full of reluctance and heartache. Although he didn't know what Dustless was doing, he was sure that he was using his precious test specimen for experiments. Uchiha Madara's body was given to Caesar by Dustless, and it took him several years to maintain the current state. Of course, it was also thanks to Dustless's cells that he was able to repair it so perfectly. You only dealt with the first few processes. The final processing process will be done by Dustless, Sama. Turning his head and glancing at Caesar, White Zetsu said indifferently. He has always been respectful to Dustless, but for the other subordinates of Dustless, White Zetsu maintained equal status. The greatness of science, you know nothing. This is my perfect work. Seeing White Zetsu's arrogant look, Caesar shouted unhappily. White Zetsu just glanced at him and then he was silent. He was created by Wu Chen and he also inherited some of Wu Chen's personality. He was a man of few words and didn't like to talk nonsense. Especially with Caesar, who was a neurotic person, he had nothing to say. Pucci. The black iron rod was inserted into Madara's body, and it contained unimaginable power. Madara's lifeless body moved strangely. How is this possible? Caesar's eyes widened as he witnessed Madara's slightly twitching body, and he couldn't help but roar out loud. Shut up, I can't concentrate. Slightly squinting his eyes, the black iron rod in his hand appeared again, and once again, it went deep into Madara's body. This time the location was the head. What's more strange is that Madara's eyebrows were slightly raised, and then under Caesar's stunned gaze he opened his eyes. He's a zombie. Seeing this, Caesar screamed sharply with a roar of steel. Is this guy the reincarnation of God? Can he bring people back from the dead? Caesar's body trembled, and his pupils expanded to the largest extent in his life. His eyeballs were even about to burst out of their sockets, and they were permeated with dense blood. You're the world's #1 scientist all day long and you're so ignorant. White Zetsu took the opportunity to satirize. When it's time to hit the face, decisive counterattack. This is also a characteristic inherited from Dustless. Caesar, however, didn't care. He was panting like a cow and his face was flushed. Caesar's eyes widened and he stared at this unprecedented scene. He lost his mind like a child, quietly waiting for Dustless to perform a miracle. Chapter 705. These black iron rods were undoubtedly the tools used by Dustless to control Madara. They were created by Dustless's will, and without them Madara couldn't be controlled. Oh. I'm afraid you never dreamed that one day you would be transformed into a puppet by me. Dustless looked at Madara with a smile on his face, and he couldn't help but sigh. Dustless suddenly remembered the young him in the past. At that time he was just a pawn working for Madara. Looking back now, Dustless felt like he was in a dream. Even though he was 50 years old, every time he thought about it he was still confused. So powerful. Caesar's eyes were shining, and the way he looked at Dustless changed dramatically. Before it was just simple respect, but now it was like looking at a god. In his eyes, a human being with a mortal body would not be able to reach such a level. It's normal for Caesar to have such an idea. As a native of this world, he doesn't understand and has never seen chakra, a power that he has never been involved in. After a while, Madara was full of catheters, and under Caesar's surprised gaze he finally stood up. It's the first time I'm using it, although it's not smooth. But it should be no problem to deal with Kizaru. Dustless said calmly. Kizaru was just an admiral of the marine, so it wasn't difficult to stop him. Dustless glanced at Caesar, who was fascinated and puzzled and couldn't help but shake his head. Naturally, he understood what this old guy was thinking. This wasn't a product of science, but his will. It wasn't something that could be understood by the word science. Yin-yang release was beyond scientific knowledge. Plop. At this moment, with the sound of water flowing, Madara stood up from the pool, and his whole body was full of catheters. His whole body was expressionless, no different from a machine. Dustless wasn't an Uzumaki Nagato. Even though it was his first time using it and he wasn't very proficient in some areas, he could still control Madara from a distance. 1 meter and 10,000 meters meant the same thing to him. He was not like Nagato, who sneaked up on Muyi and insisted on running near Muyi to strengthen his control of Heavenly Way. Marihua only needed to control the Heavenly Axiom. As for the other 5, maybe Madara isn't enough, so it's better to test it on someone else. White Zetsu tentatively suggested. Hearing this, Dustless glanced at him faintly. Driving Kizaru away doesn't mean killing him. 1 tendo is enough to deal with him. Caesar listened in confusion. He didn't understand the conversation between Dustless and White Zetsu, but he understood the general meaning. When these things were in their complete state, there should be 6 of them. Is it only perfect if there are 6 of them? Caesar's tone was doubtful. Although he didn't know the strength of this Uchiha Madara in front of him, one thing was certain. Something that Dustless personally made would definitely not be weak. And listening to Dustless's previous words, he wanted to use this thing to deal with Kizaru, who was a marine admiral. You're quite clever. White Zetsu joked. If he could find an opportunity, he wouldn't mind hitting Caesar. This guy relied on the fact that he built Hades for Dustless. He usually thought that he was superior and arrogant. Not to mention White Zetsu, even Doflamingo sometimes didn't put him in his eyes. Wu Chen's forces could be short of anyone, but Caesar could not be short of. Humph. Caesar looked at White Zetsu fiercely and then asked with a face full of curiosity. This kind of thing can you, know? Before Caesar's voice fell, Dustless directly said. He understood what Caesar meant. It was estimated that he wanted to ask what kind of thing the black conduit on Uchiha Madara's body was. In this world, not everything can be explained by science and not everything can be evolved by science. This is the gap between strength. White Zetsu despised. The yin-yang release was mysterious and abnormal, beyond the world's understanding. Even Chakra didn't know what it was, so Caesar couldn't understand it. Caesar's face was red and he stared at White Zetsu and said, "Science is omnipotent. The development of civilization, to a certain extent, can even bring people back from the dead." You're right. For Caesar's words, Dustless nodded in agreement. There is a saying that every profession has its own master, such as Hades, an ancient weapon crowned with the title of God, is a product of science and technology. It can't be underestimated, and it was made thousands of years ago. In short, there is no limit to everything and there is no absolute. Everything has its own way, and when it evolves to the extreme, it will turn into something magical. Humph. Caesar looked at White Zetsu and gave him a look of exultation. He looked arrogant and his excited expression was full of provocation. These 2 guys. Seeing this scene, Wuxian was speechless about these two buffoons who liked to bicker. Then he swaggered away and left the dark laboratory. At the same time, Uchiha Madara quickly put on his clothes and walked out of the laboratory with a cold expression. For Crocodile, Dustless naturally wasn't interested in such a small character. The purpose of creating Uchiha Madara was to stop Kizaru. Otherwise, Robin would be caught by that wretched old man. Dustless also counted on Robin to be an undercover in the Straw Hat Pirates, so naturally he couldn't do as Sengoku wished. In the future, when it comes to cleaning up the Marines, Tendo will do it. It will save me the trouble of doing it myself. With a gloomy smile, Dustless said. Although he was also an admiral of the Marine, his purpose was different from Sengoku's, so he couldn't let Sengoku do what he wanted. Chapter 706. As soon as he stepped out of the dark laboratory, an anxious figure came into view. The newcomer's skin was wheat-colored, with golden hair and fiery red feathers all over his body, exuding a gloomy and depressing atmosphere. The corner of his mouth outlined an elegant smile. Dustless recognized the person in front of him, or rather in the whole world only Doflamingo dressed like this. He is also Dustless's dedicated henchman. Many things are handled by him. For example, Doflamingo, who is over 40 years old this year, is at the level of an admiral and is quite powerful. At the moment, his face was full of anxiety and his brows were wrinkled. Obviously, something bad has happened. I heard that you have been living a good life these days. Before Doflamingo could speak, Dustless spoke first. Because Doflamingo is one of the 7 warlords of the sea, he alone controls the business of both the black and white side, and no one dares to stop Doflamingo, so his business is getting bigger and bigger. He has been living a good life in recent years and is very carefree. Dustless also turns a blind eye to this. Doflamingo secretly sells all kinds of firearms and a large number of artificial devil fruits. It is estimated that he has earned at least tens of billions of berries over the years. Of course, people like Dustless and Doflamingo have a deluded concept of money. It is just a number. The most important thing is that a large number of devil fruits and smuggled firearms can make the world chaotic. This is also the reason why Dustless indulges Doflamingo. Doflamingo's old face suddenly collapsed. He took off his sunglasses, revealing a worried face. He looked sallow and emaciated, and it wasn't hard to see that he had been unusually troubled recently. The side effects of the artificial devil fruit army formed by 100 Beast Kaido came out. He killed the subordinates I sent to accept berries and also shouted to expose me for selling fake goods. The artificial devil fruit that Doflamingo sold to Kaido was a defective product developed by Caesar. It has a lot of side effects. After a long time, it will drain a person's body and drain the host's own energy. It will not take long for the host to die of exhaustion. Selling fake goods. So what? You're making money out of nothing, Dustless said with a straight face. Anyway, there is no guilt in it, and the berry that Kaido sent was just ill-gotten wealth. That bastard, he said that he would inform the Marine headquarters about the news of me selling artificial devil fruit. Doflamingo gritted his teeth and roared. That old man is quite smart. Dustless nodded slightly, secretly praising Kaido's quick-wittedness. Privately developing artificial devil fruits was not a small crime, especially when Doflamingo sold it to the world's pirates, even the Revolutionary Army's troops and some war-torn kingdoms. The world government would definitely not be able to bear the consequences. Even the Shichibukai could not bear the anger of the Gorosei, 5 elder stars. Selling the artificial devil fruit to the Yonko for emperors was not a joke. It's a trivial matter. If he wanted to tell the Gorosei, 5 elder stars, and the Marine headquarters, what you did was already in broad daylight. Even if I cover up for you, it's useless. Dustless explained with a smile. Doflamingo was stunned. Indeed, since Kaido did not inform the government and the Marine, it means that there is still room for maneuver. It's estimated that he wants the real thing, not the previous fake products. Dustless's eyes flashed. His eyes were shining as clear as water. Dustless naturally knew what Kaido's idea was. It was nothing more than to truly complete the artificial devil fruit. He did not expose Doflamingo but quietly explained everything. After all, only Doflamingo has artificial devil fruit in the world, and Kaido does not want to lose this only source. How can that be? That guy is ambitious. If we give him the real devil fruit, he will definitely repay kindness with ingratitude in the future. He will use the artificial devil fruit to deal with us. This is supporting the enemy. Doflamingo struggled. He hated Kaido very much. Now that he wants to support the enemy, it's better to kill him. What about supporting the enemy? Look at the long term. Dustless said without changing his expression. Even if he gets the artificial devil fruit, Kaido will form a devil fruit army to attack the marine and other pirates. For the time being, it will not be Dustless's turn. And funding Kaido to beat the marine and other pirates, Dustless doesn't think there is anything wrong with it. This is also a disguised use. Using Kaido to weaken the strength of the pirates and the marine will reduce the resistance when they rule the world in the future. What if that old guy doesn't know? You also know that the higher the status of a pirate, the more greedy they are. Doflamingo still struggled. Doflamingo had a bone-deep hatred for Kaido. Back then he was beaten by Kaido until he was looking for his teeth on the ground. If it wasn't for Dustless arriving in time and saving him from the tiger's den, perhaps many years ago, Doflamingo would have already gone to the underworld to report. If that's the case, let him shut up forever. Behind Wuxian, Uchiha Madara's eyes shone with a cold light, and his whole body exposed an extremely powerful aura. His whole body's temperament was like an unsheathed sword, invincible and extraordinarily overbearing and oppressive. It's obviously a dead body. How can it be? Doflamingo's face was full of horror. Looking at the long black hair of Uchiha Madara, he felt a heavy oppression, making his forehead uncontrollably break out in cold sweat, and his face involuntarily showed fear. Doflamingo felt a fatal threat from this man who was covered in all kinds of black iron rods. It was as if he had met his legendary natural enemy, which made him fearful and panicked. Chapter 707. On the blue sea, several battleships were moving quickly. Kizaru stood proudly on the ship, his mouth leisurely blowing smoke rings, his face relaxed, wearing huge glasses. His demeanor looked quite comfortable and comfortable. Thinking of the comfortable and leisurely life now, Kizaru's depression also disappeared. It's really not easy to climb to this point. It took a lot of hard work and now the rain is finally over. It's a sunny day in life. Although he's already half 100 years old, he's still young compared to some big pirates. Admiral Borsellino, we've been sailing for a night. Do you want to find an island to rest? At this moment, a military officer came to Kizaru and tentatively suggested. Looking around, the entire fleet's personnel were tired like dead dogs. Kizaru's eyes flashed with hesitation. Thinking of the importance of Nico Robin, he wanted to refuse directly. But then he looked around and saw everyone's weak appearance. He also knew that it's too much. After all, these were all ordinary Marines. There was a world of difference between their physique and the generals as well as all other aspects. After about half a day of travel, Kizaru and the others came to a deserted island. It was quite desolate and there were no birds or beasts, but the size of the island was beyond imagination. A group of soldiers ran to the island to rest and some even directly vomited. This group of young people is really useless. Seeing this scene, Kizaru couldn't help but shake his head. Compared with his humanoid weapon, all aspects are 1,000 miles away. The humanoid weapon, which is designed with Bartholomew as the basis, has now begun to be mass-produced. In order to prevent accidents, Kizaru brought a lot of them this time. It's just that these are machines and they don't need to get off the ship, so they stay on the battleship. Kakaka. At this moment, on the shore of the nameless island, strange ripples suddenly splashed on the sea surface. It spread rapidly like a wave and in an instant, it spread hundreds of meters away. Immediately, under everyone's gaze, several marine battleships slowly sank. Even with Kizaru's calm temperament, he was stunned. He looked at the scene in front of him with a surprised face, and immediately his wretched old face twitched. Although he didn't know what was going on, there was only one possibility for this strange supernatural imagination. They were attacked. You've got guts. A cold light emerged in his eyes. Kizaru wiped his glasses. His squinted eyes enlarged, emitting a dangerous light. His eyes looked straight into the depths of the sea, and immediately his whole body emitted a golden flash. His whole body gradually collapsed, losing its texture, and a large number of photons all floated to the clouds. Using the characteristics of the glint-glint fruit, Kizaru was able to float in the air for a short period of time. In just a few seconds he was able to condense extremely dense flashes of light. The dazzling narrow light pulsed in Kizaru's palm, covering a surprisingly large area. Kizaru knows that the ship has sunk and there is no possibility of salvaging it, which means that the mission has failed. If they don't catch the culprit, Sengoku will inevitably scold them. Yasukani no Magatama, the densely packed golden light bullets poured down like ants, swallowing the entire sea in an instant. The sinking warship was instantly smashed into pieces. Bang bang bang. The earth trembled violently, raising smoke and dust that covered the sky. Looking straight ahead, there were more than a dozen shadows in the hazy smoke and dust. All of them escaped from the Navy's sunken warship. However, in the face of Kizaru's exaggerated attack, he didn't care about them. Whiz whiz whiz, the golden light bullets were mighty, annihilating everything in the world. Even if the warship was disintegrated, the raging golden light bullets did not stop attacking, but went straight to the dark shadow in the depths of the sea. Under the perception of observation haki, Kizaru clearly perceived the location of the dark shadow. Smart. The mysterious dark shadow on the bottom of the sea raised a playful arc, looking at the light bullets that were about to hit him into a sieve. His face with a black catheter swept a sneer. Bang. At the bottom of the sea, it was as if he was on land, ignoring the gravity of the sea and jumping out of the sea. Thick. Who the hell is he? He can float in the air. Kizaru's eyes widened and his dry mouth was round. He asked himself that he had fought countless pirates in his life and witnessed countless strange abilities, but it was the first time he saw someone who could fly out of thin air. Quietly staring at the dark shadow in the sky, Kizaru keenly smelled an unprecedented danger. He put away his sloppy appearance and flipped through the information in his mind, but he had never seen or heard of this character. Looking up, the mysterious man's back was facing Kizaru. He could only see his side, his long black hair dancing in the wind, wearing black gloves, wearing red armor, his whole body was filled with a cold breath of decay. The invincible momentum and the spirit of despising all things made Kizaru stunned. Such an arrogant guy is really rare, Kizaru said in a frivolous tone. Even so, Borsellino's face flashed with cold light. He was a marine admiral, but the mysterious man in front of him seemed to treat him as an ant, as worthless as a cabbage on the roadside. Whiz whiz whiz. At this moment, there was a violent vibration in the smoke and there were as many as a dozen pacifists' big mouths and dangerous eyes condensed in their mouths. The source of this trick was Kizaru's laser. Of course, because it was not his body, it was much weaker. Naive? At this moment, the mysterious man in the sky suddenly turned his head, revealing a purple eye with a wicked smile on the corner of his mouth, staring at the roaring flash, the corner of his mouth slightly opened. Wheel grave, border prison. Chapter 708. There is no doubt that this strange dress, the only person in the world who has Rinnegan and can use the unparalleled ninjutsu like Lune Tomb, border prison, is Uchiha Madara, who was made into Tendo by Dustless. There is no one else. Lune Tomb, border prison. As Uchiha Madara's voice fell, the void suddenly burst. A violent turbulence and energy fluctuations visible to the naked eye rapidly expanded and extended, annihilating the light beam in an instant. Even the clouds floating in the void were eroded and erased due to the overbearing power of this attack. This guy actually broke the pacifista's laser in one go? Kizaru's tone was surprised, and even because of the incredible reason, his mouth trembled slightly, and the whole person lost his usual calmness. He understood the power of the pacifista. Especially the laser of the laser, which is his glinting fruit. Kizaru naturally understands its power. Even if a pirate with a bounty of more than 100 million berries is hit, he will be killed in seconds. Tell me your name. Kizaru was not angry, his voice was very soft, but it gave a kind of pleasant feeling. The whole person was like the grandfather next door. All in all, Kizaru at this moment gave people a very strange feeling, and even the marine on the side was puzzled. Uchiha Madara. Uchiha Madara looked at Kizaru with his hands crossed in front of him. Tendo Uchiha Madara raised the corner of his mouth slightly, and then his lips opened slightly, calmly saying his name. Uchiha Madara? Kizaru, who had never heard of this name, frowned, and his mentality that had not been angry for many years flashed anger, and there was always an unknown fire burning in his heart. He didn't know why, but he always felt that Uchiha Madara's every move and every word was full of contempt, as if nothing in the world could be reflected in his eyes. Kizaru, this kid is smart. Dustless, who was far away in Mariehua, laughed. Others may not know what Kizaru meant, But he understood very well that Kizaru actually stretched out his intention to win him over. After all, Uchiha Madara has no bounty and his strength is not bad. If he can be pulled into the marine, it will be a blessing. The idea is beautiful, but the reality is really cruel. The mission is complete. It's time to retreat. Completely ignoring Kizaru, Uchiha Madara showed everyone his back. His simple appearance made everyone stunned. Kizaru and the others felt worse than eating 10 pounds of flies. In front of this man they were all insignificant pawns. You want to leave? How can I explain this to Sengoku? After several provocations, Kizaru's heart was as calm as an ancient well. His flame index also increased. His face was cold and he immediately turned into a golden photon and whizzed out. The sharp whistling sound in the air made one's scalp tingle. Such a big formation. Do you think that I wouldn't notice you and purposely go easy on you? Uchiha Madara's footsteps stopped as he noticed the loud noise behind him. He muttered to himself as he formed a seal with both hands. In just a blink of an eye, a simple earth release ninjutsu was completed. Earth escape, earthquake core. The earth behind Uchiha Madara trembled, and a solid earth wall instantly condensed, separating Kizaru and Uchiha Madara. How can such a scam work? With a sneer on his face, Kizaru's hands suddenly condensed the outline of a golden sword. Kusanagi Cloud Sword. It was a divine sword that could cut through iron as though it was mud. The sharpness of the sword was enough to cut through meteorites. The blazing heat that emanated from the sword was something that no one dared to underestimate. As long as one came into contact with it, they would be melted into nothingness by the blazing heat. The wall that rose from the ground was penetrated by the flash of light, and then shattered with a bang. Please go to the marine headquarters with this old man, otherwise... Kizaru's words stopped abruptly as the blazing temperature hit his face. He looked up and saw a giant fireball roaring in front of him. Due to its terrifying power, the ground was scorched yellow and hideous cracks appeared. It was no different from a riverbed that had been dry for several years. In an instant, it swallowed Kizaru and passed through his body. So strong. Looking at the fireball penetrating his body, Kizaru couldn't help but take a deep breath. Perhaps if he didn't launch his elemental transformation ability at the last moment, he would have been seriously injured. What kind of ability is he? Paramecia? It shouldn't be. Logia? It doesn't seem to be. Kizaru carefully looked at Tendo Uchiha Madara, and his clear mind fell into a dead end. It was the first time he met such a tricky enemy. However, thinking of his huge advantage, Kizaru's old face changed faster than flipping a book. The biggest advantage of the glinting fruit is its terrifying speed and powerful strength. With a golden luster, Kizaru completely ignored the distance. In less than a blink of an eye, Kizaru jumped close to Uchiha Madara. Dustless, who was far away in Mariehua controlling the heavenly axiom, just smiled indifferently and was unprecedentedly calm. Speed is power. Have you ever been kicked at the speed of light? The voice of the vicissitudes of life rang in Uchiha Madara's ears, and he looked at Kizaru's calf that had condensed a dazzling light. Seeing this, Uchiha Madara just smiled disdainfully, and the black ball that had quietly condensed in his hand was thrown into the sky. Gravity is the natural enemy of everything. Even light is no exception. Have you ever been swallowed by gravity? Admiral Borsellino. Chibaku Tensei. Chapter 709. The black sphere in the sky looked harmless and small enough to be ignored, but what frightened Kizaru was that his whole body was out of control. Instinctively, he wanted to turn into a flash of light and slip away, but the deadly gravity made him afraid to take risks, and an inexplicable voice in his heart warned him not to elementalize. Ka ka ka. The earth kept trembling and jumping like a swamp, extremely fragile. Boom boom boom. He didn't know how long it took, and finally the earth, which could not withstand this gravity, burst open and a huge gap appeared. The ground was easily torn apart by the penetrating gravity of Chibaku Tensei, leaving a terrible gap. Could it be that? What a joke. For the first time in his life, Kizaru's eyes showed panic. Under this boundless gravity he couldn't move an inch. His body was invisible, as if he was carrying a mountain without a physical body, and breathing was 100 times more difficult than usual. He vaguely understood Uchiha Madara's intention to use the small black sphere as the core to form an unprecedented giant meteorite. No, I'm just sitting there waiting for death. The hesitation in his eyes turned into determination as he stared at the sphere in the sky that was about to swallow the world. Kizaru was scared and the void was obviously changing. The terrifying gravity could even distort space and time. Once he was taken in by that thing, he couldn't do anything even if he tried his best. Without thinking, his body directly turned into a photon and whizzed out. What can you do under the gravity of Chibaku Tensei? Dustless, who was far away in Mariejo, sighed helplessly. Light was attracted by gravity. If Kizaru had been prepared in advance, he could have escaped, but he was unaware that he had been covered by gravity and was destined to be swallowed by Chibaku Tensei. The elementalized Kizaru not only did not escape the swallowing of Chibaku Tensei, but he was also quickly crushed by Chibaku Tensei. At the moment when he was about to be crushed, a little crystal mist suddenly appeared in the air. This is ice dregs? Dustless, who was controlling Uchiha Madara, was puzzled as he caught the falling crystal transparent body. Boom boom boom. The void flashed with a dazzling fire, and the broken walls immediately fell under the pull of gravity. Tendo Uchiha Madara turned his head slightly, and the figure behind him was looming in the smoke and dust. Rinnegan rippled. Far away in Mariehua, Dustless's doubts also disappeared. No wonder Sengoku called to deliberately test me. It turned out to be for this reason. It's a pity that he didn't wait for me, but he waited for Uchiha Madara. Dustless gloated with the corner of his mouth slightly raised. It's really unfortunate to meet two admirals, Tendo Uchiha Madara said with a headache. Others couldn't see the blurred reflection in the dust, but Uchiha Madara could see it clearly. His tall body was nearly 3 meters tall, not far from Kizaru's height. I don't hear any regret or misfortune in your tone. Please at least tell us your purpose for attacking the navy out of nowhere. At least we can give the fleet admiral an explanation. Akiji walked out of the smoke with a lazy face. His expression was sloppy, but his voice was extremely cautious. Before this, how did you know the weakness of Chibaku Tensei? Turning his head, Uchiha Madara asked with interest. Hearing this, Akiji shook his head and shrugged. It turned out to be Chibaku Tensei. Its power is as arrogant as its name. It's not a weakness. I was just taking a gamble. I couldn't just sit there and wait for death, so I directly attacked the Black Sphere. As for whether I could save Borsellino or not, it would depend on his luck. But now it seems like I made the right bet. Uchiha Madara heard this and nodded sincerely. The weakness of Chibaku Tensei was to attack the Black Sphere before it was formed, so Chibaku Tensei would collapse by itself. At the same time, golden photons condensed around Akiji. At first it was a little bit and then gradually increased, converging into a tall figure with the word, justice, clearly visible behind the white cloak. It was Admiral Kizaru, but because of the demonic scene just now, his face was a little pale and bloodless and he was still in shock. Presumably, it was the first time Kizaru had experienced such a horrible scene in recent decades. It's really unpredictable. The person I was waiting for didn't come, but it seems that I'm waiting for a more powerful person. Really, why are powerful enemies always on the opposite side of the marine? By the way, you haven't returned to the purpose of attacking the marine, Akiji asked while looking at Uchiha Madara's eyes. Dustless Mariehua's mouth curled into a smug smile. The person he was waiting for didn't come. He was afraid that he was talking about him, but unexpectedly he was waiting for Uchiha Madara. Reason? What reason do you need? When a pirate meets a marine or a marine meets a pirate, what reason do you think is needed to fight? What other reason do you think is needed? Facing the two admirals, Uchiha Madara replied calmly. His plain tone was exactly the same as the dialogue between ordinary people, maintaining calmness. In the eyes of Kizaru and Akiji it was very strange. Don't say that they met two admirals at the same time. Even if they met one of them, the pirates often fled without fighting. Be careful, this guy is very evil, Kizaru said cautiously. What kind of ability does he have? Akiji asked, thinking of Madara's ability. Hearing this, Kizaru's face suddenly stiffened and he shook his head with a pale face and then said in a half-joking, half-serious tone, maybe in the future there will be more devil fruit, and the ability user himself is this guy named Uchiha Madara. Chapter 710. Hearing Kizaru's words, Akiji's face changed slightly. Perhaps Kizaru was exaggerating, but he is also one of the most powerful people in the Marine headquarters. For Kizaru to say such words, it can be seen how terrifying Uchiha Madara is. Akiji was a little more wary of Madara. This yellow monkey is quite clever and has rich combat experience. He deserves to be a marine admiral. Dustless, who was far away in Mariehua, nodded secretly. He just tried to use armament hockey and it was easy and simple. Strangely, he couldn't control Uchiha Madara to use armament hockey. It was the same as the original Naruto world. Dustless used the body of elephant turn technique, but he couldn't launch the ability of glint glint fruit. It's probably because of the different power systems of the two worlds. Uchiha Madara didn't touch armament hockey, but it doesn't matter. Shaking his head, Dustless instantly understood the reason. His deep eyes were extraordinarily wise and confident. Even if Uchiha Madara doesn't use hockey, if it wasn't for Akiji, the battle might have ended. It's strange that he can't use armament hockey, but in any case we have a great advantage. Akiji's surprise turned into relief. He never thought that Uchiha Madara wouldn't be able to use hockey. This way the odds of winning are much greater. Logia users are the natural enemies of those who can't use hockey. As soon as Akiji's voice fell, Uchiha Madara sneered. Arrogant words? A natural enemy of mine? So what if you don't use hockey? Do you think I can't do anything to you too? His body full of black iron rods was oppressive and terrifying. In the dark, Uchiha Madara seemed to be emitting black gas behind him. Combined with the strange eyes, he was like a death god coming out of the underworld. It's actually very simple to deal with Logia. You don't necessarily need armament hockey, other abilities will do. His hands quickly printed and Uchiha Madara's mouth curved. If you dare to use the elements, you can try it. This guy is really arrogant. With a snort, Akiji's eyes flashed with a cold light. At the same time, Uchiha Madara's hand print was completed, and an endless sea of fire spewed out of his mouth. Fire style, grand fire annihilation. Scorching hot flames that almost covered the entire sky came rushing over in a grandiose manner. This unprecedented scale covered the sky and covered the earth. Even the sky was dyed a deep red and the scene was extremely spectacular. Kizaru calmly elementalized and so did Akiji. However, in the next second, Akiji ended his elemental transformation and revealed his original body. His old face was tense and looked a little depressed. What's wrong? You don't dare to elementalize. Uchiha Madara teased. Akiji's expression was within his expectations. Kizaru narrowed his eyes and looked at the melted water droplets under Akiji's feet. He then looked at the hot environment around him. Kazan's body is melting. His attributes are restrained. Kizaru Zhanwei said as he recalled the black sphere. Sometimes the suppression of one's celestial attribute was even more terrifying than domineering. Akiji's old face was gloomy. Fortunately, he reacted in time and ended his elemental transformation. Otherwise, his body that had turned into ice would have been directly evaporated by the monstrous fire. Ice Aeon. He leaped up and shot out long and narrow icicles from his arms. Kakaka. Countless ice dregs extended from the ground and the earth was instantly frozen. Immediately, it rose violently and turned into an iceberg of more than 10 meters, trying to block the fire. Fire can restrain water, but water can also restrain fire and even has an advantage. Tomb of Samsara, border prison. His eyes were filled with ripples and then in Madara's sight, several shadows flew out quickly. Each of them had infinite power and looked no different from Uchiha Madara. The majestic ice mountain was instantly smashed by the shadows, and the sea of fire swept out and swallowed Akiji in an instant. The boundless sea of flames swept down with monstrous momentum. Everywhere it passed it was a complete mess. The ground was roasted to an unbearable state. Hideous cracks appeared on the ground, and the earth was slowly cracking apart. This armament hockey is really a headache. Uchiha Madara sighed helplessly. Nonsense, even if you feel a headache at least show some embarrassment, your acting is really bad. Admiral Kizaru took a cigarette and said sarcastically. In the sea of fire, Akiji stood tall and straight like a mountain. However, this Akiji was not that Akiji. His whole body was as black as ink and even deeper than ink shining in the sea of fire. Madara's eyes passed through the thick sea of fire and Akiji, who was in the state of armament hockey, came into view. Every inch of his skin turned into hard steel, resisting the erosion of the flame. Dustless, who was controlling Madara in Mariehua, was calm and felt that this scene was very normal. Armament hockey is a universal skill in this world. Virgo, as a vice admiral of the Marine, can be fully armed. There is no reason why Akiji as an admiral can't do this. Moreover, he was better than Virgo in every aspect. This feeling is really uncomfortable. Looking around at the blazing sea of fire, even because the fire was too fierce, it burned on Akiji's whole body, and the hot temperature was enough to evaporate everything. Akiji, who was in armament hockey, looked cold. As long as he was elementalized, he was afraid that he would be annihilated on the spot. Akiji's heart was filled with unspeakable grievances. Being forced to such a point by a person who could not use armament hockey, Akiji felt bad luck and helplessness, and at the same time, there was fire in his heart. Chapter 7:11. Water and fire were naturally two opposite attributes. The moment the fire appeared, Akiji felt uncomfortable all over, as if he was going to be melted. His body kept sweating. Water can restrain fire and fire can restrain fire. In the end, who can restrain who and who is better depends on the level of strength. You seem to have forgotten the existence of this old man. Kizaru's calf condensed a powerful flash, and the dazzling light could burn human eyes, making people not dare to look directly at it and instinctively close their eyes. Lightspeed kick. With Kizaru's voice fell, a straight ray of light shot out, cutting through the void, and in the blink of an eye, Uchiha Madara was swallowed. Seeing this, Uchiha Madara still held his hands in front of him and didn't hide. His purple pupils splashed with ripples, and his shadow immediately responded. Boom, boom, boom. A harsh explosion sounded out of thin air and the earth trembled, followed by a huge fireball rising into the air, and the blazing impact spread out. On the ground where Uchiha Madara stood, a clear scorched black hole came into view. Even if you don't die, you'll lose a layer of skin. Kizaru said calmly while blowing smoke rings. The power of Lightspeed Kick is amazing, and it can even destroy a mountain and tear a huge crack in the solid earth. The consequences can be imagined if a human body withstands it. Is that so? Then you're doomed to be disappointed. In the black smoke of burning flames, a figure loomed, and the burning flames around him tried to swallow him, but they were crushed like candles in the wind. In the flames, Uchiha Madara was cold, and every time he took a step, the burning flames would gradually extinguish and collapse. Boom! With the last footstep falling, Uchiha Madara stepped out of the flames intact. This guy. Impossible, I just hit him head-on. Kizaru frowned and said with a tone of disbelief. The mystery of Tomb of Reincarnation, border prison, is mysterious, and you ordinary people will never understand it. Uchiha Madara's face remained cold as he said indifferently. Is it possible that my kick missed? Impossible. Looking at the intact Uchiha Madara, Kizaru's face was strange. At this time Akiji, who was in the state of armament hockey, also came to Kizaru. I don't think so. Something seemed to have blocked the attack for him. Akiji guessed. He had been observing Uchiha Madara's movements. The moment he was attacked, the flash exploded in advance, and it didn't hurt Uchiha Madara's body. You guys are quite smart. Tendo Uchiha Madara couldn't help but look at Akiji with admiration. One was probing the enemy from the front, while the other was secretly observing the enemy's every move. Their coordination was flawless. These two guys are good. It seems that in the past few decades the strength of the three admirals has progressed rapidly. Dustless, who was far away in Mariehua controlling Tendo Uchiha Madara, sighed. The admiral's combat experience is extremely rich. Akiji and Kizaru joined the Marine when they were 20 years old. Now the youngest of them, Akiji, is nearly 50 years old. They have been fighting pirates for 30 years. 30 years of rich experience as well as combat experience is not a joke, especially when it comes to devil fruit ability users. Some ability users have never heard of or seen before. Therefore, the Admiral's adaptability is extremely strong. Although they are extremely surprised by Uchiha Madara's ability, they still remain calm and calm. It seems that it's time to retreat. There's no need to entangle with the two of them. The mission is completed. Dustless pondered. His trip was just to stop Kizaru from capturing Robin. Now that their battleship has sunk, it means that there is no means of transportation. When they arrive at Alabasta, maybe Robin will have joined the Straw Hat Pirates and left. Want to go? If I let you go so openly, how will I explain it to Fleet Admiral Sengoku? Kizaru's eyes reflected a cold light, and he immediately waved his hand with great momentum. Like a sculpture of a pacifist, he moved side by side to block Uchiha Madara. A mantis trying to stop a chariot. No one can stop me if I want to go. Not to mention the two of you, even if the Marine's top battle powers gather together, they won't be able to do it. The void vibrated, ripples visible to the naked eye, and a strong repulsive force expanded. Uchiha Madara mobilized a large amount of chakra, and there was even a little blood in his eyes. The whole person was particularly terrifying. This state was no different from an erupting volcano, full of indescribable danger. Super Shinra Tensei. The whole island trembled violently, and the high-density chakra in the body erupted. The impact was as vast as the ocean, and the earth under Uchiha Madara's feet was directly wiped out. Kiji and Kizaru were fine. Both of them were extraordinary, and their observation haki and armament haki were unparalleled. Although they were affected, they escaped the fatal surprise attack. However, the pacifist was not so lucky. Ka. The pacifist's body suddenly cracked under the impact. Even if their skin was as hard as iron, it was difficult to guarantee that they would survive. Their bodies were torn apart by the boundless force, revealing various mechanical parts. That Vegapunk is worthy of being a peerless genius. Uchiha Madara's eyes narrowed and his anger converged. Although the modified pacifista's stats weren't as good as the original Bartholomew Bear in all aspects, its body's hardness had increased by quite a bit. The special materials used to construct the pacifista were obviously not ordinary. Chapter 7:12. As far as the eye could see, the entire central area of the island had suffered an unprecedented impact. The earth had been flattened. The island had suffered a direct impact from the Super Shinra Tensei. The devastated island was a shocking sight and the giant craters were obvious. This extremely large area of effect attack left everyone dumbfounded. Not only that, the exaggerated destructive power was unforgettable. The entire terrain of the island was rewritten by this unprecedented attack. Kazan, are you sure the opponent we are fighting is really human? Kizaru's face was covered with dust. At this moment he looked like an old man who hadn't taken a bath for many years. This should be maybe. Not only Kizaru but even Akiji had doubts. The answer sounded ambiguous. Such a large-scale attack was beyond imagination, and the two of them were fortunate enough to follow Garp and Senshi Sengoku to fight against the legendary pirate king Goldie Roger. Roger, who was almost deified by the world, may not be able to make such a shocking attack. One move almost destroyed the entire island. Anyway, it is necessary to investigate the origin of this guy, otherwise we can't complete the task. Kizaru flicked the dust and lit a cigarette. Hearing this, Kuzan nodded in agreement and stared at Tendo Uchiha Madara, who was covered with black tubes with a frozen face. Let's go together. The moment Kizaru's voice fell, he disappeared. Looking at the fragments of the Kazuchi Hall Madara crushed like ants, his old eyes flashed with disapproval. These simple machines can be mass-produced as many as you want. Yasukani no Magatama. Knowing the strength of Uchiha Madara, Kizaru chose to be cautious. He waved his hand and used his most powerful move. Dark blue light erupted. Unlike the golden giant Dustless's body, a blue skeleton rose from the ground and defended Uchiha Madara. Kensisanu. With Uchiha Madara's low voice, the dark blue light turned into a real one. Clang. 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 Kensisanu was swallowed in the blink of an eye. Because the light was too strong, it covered the dark blue luster of Kensisanu and dyed it golden. Ka. In the swallowed Kensisanu, the sound of bones cracking could be faintly heard. It seems that you are not invincible. Like I said, God is fair to everyone. Kizaru said calmly as he tasted the rich tobacco in his mouth. Following his gaze, the dark blue skeleton gradually collapsed. Let me give him a boost. Qingji revealed a stern expression. Both of his eyes were as sharp as a blade. Icy cold air gathered on his right arm and quickly formed a large, exquisite ice sculpture. Ice. Stormy pheasant beak. A huge ice bird condensed in an instant, flapping its wings vigorously, sending out a piercing cold wind, and with a powerful impact, it swept towards Uchiha Madara. The cold and gloomy air emanating from his body could freeze time and space. Ka. At the same time, the impenetrable Susanoo that protected Uchiha Madara finally couldn't withstand the erosion of the light, and it shattered with a bang. Whoosh. The cold wind blew. The cooperation between Kizaru and Akiji was quite close. At the moment when Kansusunu collapsed, the ice bird condensed by Akiji roared and instantly froze Uchiha Madara into a shining ice sculpture. Under the illumination of the sun, it was extraordinarily beautiful and full of artistic feeling. This monster is finally locked in a cage. His tight heart relaxed and Akiji breathed a sigh of relief. His slightly tired old face also regained its luster. What an unexpected disaster! I was forced into such a mess by a guy with no bounty. Really, how come there are more and more monsters in this world? Looking at himself, Kizaru couldn't help but complain. Looking up, there were many scorched holes in Kizaru's clothes, all thanks to Uchiha Madara. Contact the fleet admiral, the battleship has been completely destroyed by him, we can only send someone to pick up. Akiji's voice didn't fall, and the ice that froze Uchiha Madara made a crisp roar, and many cracks could be clearly seen on the surface of the ice. Could it be that this guy is still moving? Akiji's eyes were filled with cold light, and he didn't hesitate to touch the ground with his hands, and the whole earth was instantly swallowed by the ice. Sage. The more piercing ice swallowed Uchiha Madara, and the broken ice all over his body healed and solidified again. Compared to the previous ice bird, this Ice Age was undoubtedly more terrifying. He has such a strange ability, maybe it's really like what you said. I don't know when an all-rounder like him will appear. Thinking of Uchiha Madara's dazzling ability, Akiji couldn't believe it. All-rounder? So what? In front of justice, even if he's invincible, he has to stretch his neck and accept the punishment. Kizaru flicked the ash off his cigarette and said lightly, I say, are you two mistaken? Do you think that's the real me? At this moment, a ghostly voice came from behind Kizaru and Akiji. What you see may not be true. What you painstakingly deal with is actually just my shadow. Do you think you're winning? Are you Marines so naive? Turning his head, Uchiha Madara with various black tubes all over his body mocked. He touched his chin indifferently and the sharpness in his eyes converged. Damn it. This tone and this expression, why do I feel so familiar? Kizaru's old face was full of puzzlement, and he seemed to have an impression of Uchiha Madara's speech and behavior. What kind of ability is it? Forget it, for the time being you're an all-rounder. Akiji's doubts were instantly relieved and he was no longer entangled. After capturing this guy alive, all the puzzles will be solved. At the same time, the ice that froze Uchiha Madara also shattered, but there was no one inside. Originally, I had wanted to simply leave. However, it would appear that if I don't teach you two brats a lesson, you two won't let me leave unscathed. Tendo Uchiha Madara's voice became indifferent, and at the end of his words he disappeared. So fast. Seeing Tendo Uchiha Madara disappear in an instant, Kizaru and Kuzan immediately used their observation haki to perceive Tendo Uchiha Madara. Let me see how much you, three great generals, have grown. Dustless Mariehua's face was full of playfulness, and he suddenly found that his boring life was a lot happier, and then he seriously controlled Uchiha Madara's movements. Unfamiliar the first time, familiar the second time. At first it was still not too familiar. But along with the passage of time, Dustless already became more and more proficient in using heavenly Dao spots. Found it. With a cold light in his eyes, his observation haki captured Uchiha Madara's murderous intent, and the air around his body quickly froze and turned into several sharp spears. Ice, double-thorn spear. Aiming in the direction of Uchiha Madara, it immediately whistled out mercilessly. Uchiha Madara's eyes narrowed slightly, and he noticed the ice spears shooting towards him. His sunken eyes rose, his hands slightly opened, and a perfect defensive circle suddenly formed. Kinra Tensei. The 360-degree defense was watertight, protecting Uchiha Madara. The space was tightly sealed and even the air was isolated. Bang bang bang, Shinra Tensei was enough to defend against most physical attacks, and the ice spears were easily bounced off and penetrated deep into the soil. The sharp spears were hard to imagine and they directly cut the ground. A normal human would have been sliced in half with just a light slash. Laser. A large number of photons condensed at the tip of his thumb, and the shining light made people unable to open their eyes, and immediately rushed out, swallowing Uchiha Madara. Seeing this, Tendo Uchiha Madara just didn't care about it. The void in front of him slowly distorted, showing a strange vortex shape. Kemui. The powerful roar fell and the vortex-shaped space turned into a bottomless black hole, easily swallowing the gorgeous light beam. Seeing this, Kizaru suddenly froze and immediately realized that Uchiha Madara was approaching. He was about to elementalize, but suddenly remembered the terrible gravity before, and immediately cancelled the plan. His right arm glowed with golden light and a sharp sword condensed in an instant. Clang! The empty space suddenly had a spark and immediately saw two figures flashing out of thin air. Uchiha Madara, holding a black iron stick in his hand, easily blocked Kizaru's attack. "Don't forget me." Akiji attacked from behind, holding an ice sword in his hand, and used all his strength to stab Uchiha Madara's head. "You are too careless. I never said that I would fight alone." Seeing this, Uchiha Madara turned his head to look at Akiji, and the corner of his mouth swept with a gloomy smile. His eyes rippled and a very dangerous wave quietly spread. At this moment time seemed to stop. Wheel grave, border prison. Akiji's expression suddenly solidified, and the hair on his body stood up uncontrollably. He remembered Uchiha Madara's strange trick before, and his face was full of determination. Instinctively he smelled ominous and dangerous. Busashoku hardening. In an instant his whole body turned into black steel, strengthening his own defense. Boom! When the sharp ice spear was about to pierce Uchiha Madara, Akiji's right face was hit by a strong attack, and his whole body flew upside down and hit the ground heavily. "And you?" His eyes then turned to Kizaru and his pupils once again swayed with a dangerous light. Boom! With Akiji as an example, although Kizaru had been carefully prepared, he still couldn't avoid the same fate. His abdomen was hit hard and he was hit by a powerful force. Akiji and Kizaru couldn't see it, but in Uchiha Madara's sight, there were as many as 5 shadows protecting him. "Damn bastard, you don't know how to respect the old." Kizaru stood up awkwardly and his heart was extremely sullen. It's not that he didn't want to elementalize, but Uchiha Madara's method of suppressing his attributes was too terrible. Thinking of the previous experience, Kizaru's scalp was numb. Once controlled by the ghost called Chibaku Tensei, he was afraid that he would live in a meteorite for the rest of his life. Akiji's old face was also ugly. He didn't dare to elementalize easily. If he was caught, he would be directly evaporated by Uchiha Madara's hot flame. Therefore, Kizaru and Akiji could only rely on Busashoku Haki to resist. Although they would be attacked, the risk was much smaller. One wrong step and they may fall. Now you should know what you and I are aware of. Uchiha Madara glanced at the two and whispered. Kizaru and Akiji looked at each other and still refused to give up. There was no other reason except that the admirals who died in battle had never been heard of escaping from pirates. Otherwise, they would have no face to return to the marine headquarters. This unequal war didn't end until late at night. Uchiha Madara still left safe and sound. Akiji and Kizaru couldn't stop him at all and could only watch. Dustless naturally wouldn't waste time with Kizaru and Akiji, because this was originally to stop Kizaru from capturing Robin. Destroying their battleship was actually the end of the matter. However, Kizaru and Akiji refused to let go, so he could only fight. "I guess there will be a bounty tomorrow," staring at the sea in the distance, Dustless said calmly. His performance was unusually indifferent, which was inevitable. Chapter 713. The bounty on a pirate is not only based on his own strength, but also an estimate of his future potential. Making the most comprehensive analysis, if the pirate is too dangerous, the marine may immediately destroy their high-end combat power. However, as for Uchiha Madara, it is estimated that no one can destroy him. Time passed unknowingly and 2 days passed in a blink of an eye. On the magnificent sea, huge ripples appeared. Looking as far as the eye could see, several giant battleships slowly moved forward. This time the Marine Fleet Admiral Sengoku and the Marine Hero, Garp, took the lead. Can Kuzan and Borsellino be trusted, Garp? Thinking of the absurd rescue message 2 days ago, Sengoku still had deep doubts. In fact, I also think it's ridiculous. They are 2 admirals. Even if they are not opponents, they shouldn't be beaten to the point where they are about to starve to death. Garp said incredulously. They are admirals and they won't starve to death. Who knows? Anyway, we are almost there. Sengoku shook his head and smiled bitterly. He was leading the team in case of accidents, and even his old comrade Garp was involved. He was afraid that this was a trap against the marine. Uchiha Madara? When did such a guy appear in the world? This is a sign of the coming chaos. Sengoku looked at the distant sea, and his mood was particularly complicated. Powerful enemies always stand on the opposite side of the marine. 2 days ago, Kizaru Akiji and Uchiha Madara fought on the island. This island was extremely desolate and there were abandoned rocks everywhere. Not to mention suitable prey, even flowers and trees were rare. The marine's battleships were all sunk and the food and water on board as well as daily necessities, all sank to the bottom of the sea, so Kizaru Akiji and others were hungry for 2 days. There was no food on this desolate island, and the surrounding sea was extremely strange. Even fish were rare so they could only endure 2 days of hunger. It's all because of that guy. He made me so embarrassed, hateful. On the reef, Kizaru looked decadent, and he cursed Uchiha Madara listlessly. At this moment, Kizaru was unbearable to look at. His clothes were ragged and there were burnt holes everywhere. His lips were all cracked and his eyes were sunken. Akiji beside him was not much better. He simply lay on the ground and took a nap. From his tired look, it was not difficult to see that Akiji was also very sad. It's reasonable to say that with an admiral's physique, even if they don't eat for a few days, it wouldn't be a big deal, but after fighting with Uchiha Madara for almost a day, both of them have already exhausted their physical strength. It's useless to complain. If we want to capture that man, at least the 3 of us have to go together. Eiji suddenly opened his eyes. His turbid eyes were full of tiredness, like an old man in his twilight years. His empty stomach was growling uncontrollably. The 3 of us? You mean to add Sakazuki? Kizaru was surprised as the scattered sunlight regained its brilliance. The 3 marine admirals teamed up to deal with 1 person at the same time. Even the current Whitebeard couldn't withstand it. Aren't you overestimating that guy? Kizaru frowned, expressing deep doubts about this. Hearing this, Akiji glanced at Kizaru, then stood up and looked at the spectacular sea in the distance. His voice was filled with endless sadness. The era in front of us is more chaotic than the era of the Pirate King. Akiji's face was complex as he said to himself with emotion. Countless pirates are fighting for hegemony, but there is only one position of the Pirate King. It's not difficult to see how bloody the sea will be in the future. Do you think that we have a chance of winning against that man named Uchiha Madara? Akiji turned his head and looked at Kizaru meaningfully. Hearing this, Kizaru was silent and after a long time he shook his head. After almost a day of confrontation, he and Akiji were suppressed. Uchiha Madara's performance was more like a test of the bottom line of Kizaru and Akiji's strength. Looking at the miserable island, Kizaru couldn't help but feel numb and cold sweat as he thought of Uchiha Madara's strength. Rumble. At this moment, Kizaru's stomach was also rumbling, and his old face was suddenly very embarrassed. At the same time, his heart was filled with strange emotions. The experience of these days was the biggest shame of his life. The 2 dignified admirals were forced to be so unbearable and hungry. Kizaru couldn't help but feel angry when he thought about it. Akiji didn't care about this. Perhaps the 3 of us together may not be the opponent of Uchiha Madara. He is too terrifying and his strength has reached a point where we can only look up to him. Eiji said with fear. Ship? It seems to be a marine ship. The fleet admiral is finally here. Suddenly, Kizaru found a black dot in the distant sea, and the frustration on his face disappeared. Kiji nodded and looked at it. It was indeed a marine battleship. This time we lost face. As the highest battle power of the marine, we actually let the fleet admiral and Garp personally come to rescue us. Am I dreaming now? Kizaru said with a smile on his face. Kiji nodded undeniably. He also felt the same way. Sometimes he thought that this was a dream, but it was just a joke played by God. However, the flattened island, the crushed mountain, and the island where all the creatures were killed, obviously told Kizaru and Akiji that this was a cruel fact. Chapter 7:14. About half an hour later, the Marine's battleship finally docked on the shore. Fleet Admiral Sengoku and Vice Admiral Garp stepped onto the island and looked at the flattened island. Both of them looked at each other with astonishment. This attack seems to cover the whole island. After a moment of sluggishness, Sengoku, who recovered from his shock, said with a shocked face. It's not that he hasn't seen a large-scale attack. Kizaru belongs to that kind of attack. But it's the first time in his life to see such an exaggerated attack that flattened the whole island. Garp also nodded in amazement. His eyes were wide open and full of horror. He has fought with countless pirates, but he has never met anyone who can do such an exaggerated thing and change the geological structure of the entire island. Sorry, Fleet Admiral, we failed our mission. At this moment, Kuzan and Kizaru came side by side, with guilt on their faces. Their old faces were full of exhaustion, as if their souls had been taken away. Their eyes were dull and turbid. Seeing this scene, Sengoku took back the words he was about to say, and then waved his hand with great momentum, indicating that the two should go to the ship and rest for a while. From the wounds on Kizaru and Akiji's body, it's not difficult to see that they have experienced an unprecedented battle before. This world, there's another great person, Sengoku sighed. His complex tone was filled with endless sadness. Looking at the island that was almost dismembered, not to mention Kizaru and Akiji, even he had a feeling of soul trembling. Sengoku knew that the root cause of the failure of this mission was not Kizaru and Akiji. Sengoku, are you going to return empty-handed? Garp was surprised to hear the loss in Sengoku's tone. The Marine Fleet Admiral has always been the master of the hawk without seeing the rabbit. Asking him to give up the prey and return empty-handed is worse than killing him. The Uchiha Madara that Kizaru and Akiji talked about? Sengoku asked. Garp shook his head and said, I'm talking about that devil's child, Nico Robin. Aren't you going after her? Sengoku's old face suddenly collapsed and his tone was bad. If I knew the loss was so heavy, I wouldn't have taken Nico Robin. After that, Sengoku boarded the ship angrily. Garp's old face grinned as he looked at the fragments of the pacifists all over the place. He sighed and followed Sengoku's footsteps to board the battleship again. No wonder Sengoku was so angry. The two generals were beaten like rabbits. Even the newly developed humanoid weapon was crushed like an ant. It would be strange if he was happy. Time flew by and 7 days of effort quietly slipped through his fingers. The latest bounty list flowed out of the Marine headquarters and spread all over the world. Most of the names on the list were emerging pirates from all over the world, including Straw Hat Luffy. In just a few hours, the news had spread to every corner of the world. He thought it was just a sparse and ordinary bounty list issued by the Marine headquarters, but a strange bounty image soon plunged the whole world into a storm. The man in the painting was tall and big, and there were all kinds of black iron rods on his body. His cold eyes looked down at the sky and his awe-inspiring gaze looked down at everything in the world. The first impression he gave was that he was arrogant. The most surprising thing was that his bounty was as high as 500 million berries. It was as if a heavy stone had fallen into the water, setting off huge ripples. The whole world was boiling and in chaos. Pirates all over the world were talking crazily as if they had been injected with chicken blood. It's not that there are no pirates with a bounty of 500 million berries. On the contrary, there are many pirates in the second half of the Grand Line. But the man named Uchiha Madara in front of him was obviously a newcomer. His first bounty was as high as 500 million berries. Looking at the history of pirates in the past decades or even longer, it has never happened. The shock to the whole world can be imagined. A newcomer like the sea has a bounty of 500 million berries. This sky-high bounty made many veteran pirates feel ashamed, and they shouted that they want to take a look at this kid who has just entered the Dao. All in all, Uchiha Madara's name instantly became the object of discussion among pirates all over the world. Oh, Sengoku, that old man. Dustless of Mariehua naturally also received the information. Looking at the list of bounties of 500 million berries in his hand, he instantly understood the intentions of Sengoku. With the strength of Tendo Uchiha Madara, 500 million berries is indeed low. It should be 1 billion berries or even 1.5 billion berries. White Zetsu was also puzzled by this bounty. Uchiha Madara's strength is definitely more than 500 million berries. He can easily defeat 2 Marine admirals. At the very least, the conservative starting point is 700 million berries or 800 million berries. Now the bounty of only 500 million berries is really not justified. Master, this bounty is unprecedented. From the establishment of the world government to the present, for more than 800 years, no one has reached the bounty of 500 million berries for the first time. Hancock didn't know whether to laugh or cry. For the first time, don't mention 500 million berries, even 100 million berries is rare. Dustless and White Zetsu actually think that the bounty is too low. Hancock's helplessness can be imagined. I'm not talking about the bounty. Sengoku actually has a deeper meaning. Things like berries are just a concept for me. The fame and fortune of a pirate is just a fleeting cloud. Dustless replied with a deep look. Berries and reputation are trivial things. What he cares about is Sengoku's sinister plan. Chapter 7:15. All in all, the news of Uchiha Madara's bounty of 500 million berries swept the world in an instant like a hurricane, and all the pirates in the sea were shocked. A storm unique to Uchiha Madara swept the planet. Even the Whitebeard pirates who recently went berserk because of the disappearance of Fire Fist Ace, who was actually kidnapped by Dustless, stopped moving for a while and became strangely silent. They were also confused by the bounty of 500 million berries. A newcomer with a bounty of 500 million berries. This is the first time since the records of the world-famous pirates have been recorded. The name of Uchiha Madara remains in everyone's heart, and from then on his every move will inevitably affect the nerves of the world, and it is extremely difficult to ignore him. However, everything has two sides. There is a saying that the higher you stand, the harder you fall. This is a truth that has not changed since ancient times. The higher you are held, the harder you fall. In fact, it is also a disguised form of flattery. Sengoku's intention is to make Uchiha Madara the object of everyone's jealousy. Pirates pay attention to fame and fortune. Uchiha Madara's sudden rise broke the conventional rules of the One Piece world. He is the first pirate in history with a bounty of 500 million berries. There will be proud veteran pirates who will not accept this, and challengers will naturally come in an endless stream. Killing a newcomer with a bounty of 500 million berries will definitely make him famous. Therefore, the bounty of 500 million berries is just right, and more or less, it may be self-defeating. Today, one of the Yonko 4 emperors, the captain of the Bigumamu pirates, Charlotte Lingling, her bounty is only 850 million berries. Increasing the bounty of Uchiha Madara to the level of a Yonko 4 emperors will inevitably arouse suspicion. Sengoku's painstaking calculation is useless. Uchiha Madara is just an enemy of the marine. If the target is a pirate, I will personally deal with it. In this way, Sengoku's plan to kill Madara will be aborted. Dustless originally intended to hide Madara, and only when dealing with the marine will Madara come in handy. By the way, I heard that Kizaru and Akiji are starving to death. Dustless asked with interest. Picking up the photos on the table in his hand, Kizaru and Akiji's hair was messy, their faces were dirty, and they looked thin. Obviously, they haven't eaten for many days. They looked quite similar to the drug addicts Dustless used to live in the third dimension. There is no doubt that all this is thanks to Uchiha Madara. The Super Shinra Tensei destroyed the entire island in one fell swoop. Only Akiji and Kizaru were struggling. They couldn't even find food to appease their hunger, so naturally they were starving. The Navy should try to cover up this kind of photo. How can it be published in the newspaper? Isn't this hitting their own face? Wuxia wondered. Kizaru and Akiji's embarrassment was also published in the newspaper, becoming the contrast of Uchiha Madara. There's no such thing as an impenetrable wall in this world. Sometimes, the more you want to hide something, the faster it will be exposed. Hee hee. Baizu's face was filled with a wretched expression as he spoke. He even had a gloating smile on his face. Hearing this, Dustless glanced at White Zetsu. If he didn't guess wrong, it should be this kid who exposed the news to the marine. In this regard, Wuxia is too lazy to care about it. This is not a bad thing. Although he is also a marine admiral, the world government and the marine headquarters are not in the same bed as each other. Wuxia is naturally happy to fight the arrogance of the marine. Since the emergence of the three admirals in the past few years, the marine headquarters has been extremely high profile, often taking the initiative to attack the pirates of the New World, and the 7 warlords of the sea colluded with the 7 warlords of the sea. Over the years they have eliminated many vicious pirate groups. Today's New World is barely calm. At least as long as the Yonko 4 emperors don't make trouble, the sea is relatively peaceful. This sudden incident is the first time that the marine has made a fool of themselves, and the protagonists are 2 admirals. The impact is unprecedented. I think Sengoku is more uncomfortable than eating a fly. In a trance, Dustless seemed to see the angry look of Sengoku and his eyes glowed. There is no doubt that Sengoku didn't expect Uchiha Madara to appear out of thin air. The reason and motive are also inexplicable. It seems that he is just like other pirates, holding the mentality of becoming famous in the world. And the object of suffering is naturally Kizaru and Akiji. What about the movements of the Straw Hat Pirates? They should have landed on Alabasta. Dustless changed the topic to the Straw Hat Pirates. At the same time, the considerate Hancock sent a fragrant afternoon tea for Dustless to enjoy. Suddenly remembering the blue-haired girl Vivi and her father Corbula that Marijo met back then, Dustless's eyes flashed with a strange luster. It seems that he has been in contact with Crocodile. But Straw Hat Luffy was too weak and was almost killed by Crocodile on the spot. That kid survived and thought of a plan to deal with Crocodile. White Zetsu said with appreciation. Using water to deal with Crocodile, this is the strategy that Luffy came up with for the time being. Although it is very rough, it is unexpectedly effective and very practical. It can deal with Crocodile's elementalization. Kizaru and Akiji have been defeated. It seems that it won't be long before Luffy joins the Straw Hat Pirates as an undercover. It seems that everything is ready. White Zetsu heard this and nodded gently. Chapter 716. In the Marine headquarters in the solemn and sacred conference room, the atmosphere was heavy and the atmosphere was oppressive. It was hundreds of times more difficult to breathe than usual. Looking around, the whole conference room was full of stars and the 3 admirals were all in the list, including Dustless, who was also sitting in his seat. Beside him were Garp and Vice Admiral Tsuru. However, unlike the past, Akiji and Kizaru both lowered their heads, like defeated roosters, drooping their heads without the glory of the past. Now because of them, the Marine has become a laughing stock. Sengoku's old face was dark and gloomy. He knew that the reason for the failure of the mission was not Kizaru and Akiji, but it was a fact that they failed the mission. Sengoku was also not tolerant. As the highest general of the fleet admiral, he must be clear about public and private affairs. If he should be punished, he must be fair. Therefore, Kazan and Borsellino were both reprimanded, and their salaries were reduced for several years. There is no need to think about it, these are all for others to see. As an admiral of the Marine, naturally he can't dismiss them. After all, they are the highest combat power of the Marine. Boom! At this moment, a dull roar, accompanied by a blazing heat wave, spread out. Looking up, Akainu's magma fist smashed the table in front of him. Crocodile, that bastard! He has violated the original agreement and stood on the opposite side of justice. I suggest that his position as Shichibukai be revoked immediately and send troops to clean him up immediately. There is no impenetrable wall in the world. Perhaps others don't know the purpose of Crocodile, but the high-level Marine officials present know it in their hearts. When Crocodile took in Nico Robin, it happened that Robin's whereabouts were suddenly exposed. Sengoku originally planned to arrest Nico Robin immediately, but he was surprised to find that Crocodile recruited her. This has indirectly touched the bottom line of Sengoku's tolerance. Shichibukai can be lawless, but there is a limit. Without thinking, Sengoku knew what Crocodile was thinking. What if the ancient weapon was taken away by the ambitious Crocodile? That's for sure. He has already violated the taboo, so he must pay the price. Sengoku's tone was extremely hoarse, and his calm eyes flashed with scarlet violence, showing the courage of a Marine fleet admiral. This is Crocodile's own destruction, and he will not be merciful. Not only that, he had to deal with this ambitious insect immediately. Immediately issue an order to the world to revoke the position of Crocodile's Shichibukai. Sengoku stood up and wrote quickly. He wrote a simple order quickly and handed it to his assistant beside him. Then he looked around. As for the candidate to suppress Crocodile, because of Uchiha Madara, his heart is still in a mess. His strength is unprecedented and the admiral doesn't seem to be able to deal with it. The righteous sinner shall be. This time I will complete the crusade against Crocodile. Akainu was filled with righteous indignation and was about to take the initiative to accept the task. A light, lazy voice was issued in advance. It was very simple but unquestionable. You are so diligent. It's strange, did the sun come out from the south? Garp looked at Dustless beside him in surprise and said that he looked out of the window to see if the sun came out from the south. Not only Garp but all the Marine executives looked at Dustless in surprise. He is the most lazy in the Marine. Now he is so diligent, which is really incredible. Dustless glanced at the old guy and immediately looked at Sengoku on the main seat. In that case, the task of suppressing Crocodile will be handed over to you. After a long silence, Sengoku rationally decided. Even if the mysterious Uchiha Madara appears again, Dustless's strength is enough to deal with him. Even if he can't beat him, he should be able to escape. Sengoku, this old guy. Forget it, it's better for me. Crocodile, your task is over and it's over. With a sinister smile, Dustless has sentenced Crocodile to death in his heart. At the beginning he just used him. Now that the purpose has been achieved, the people who should shut up must shut up forever. No matter what, we have to arrest that guy immediately. With a cold light in his eyes, Sengoku's tone was resolute. Being slapped in the face, naturally he has to double back. Revenge has always been the principle of Sengoku. No problem, Dustless smiled confidently. His light laughter was full of casual, as if it was not worth mentioning. He naturally knows why Sengoku is so anxious. The real reason is estimated to be to make an example of Crocodile, the 7 warlords of the sea, to deter pirates. Humph. Looking at Dustless with dissatisfaction, Akainu immediately sat down. Since Dustless chose to take the initiative to attack, there is no role for him. The strength of the two sides is completely different. The giant elephant can easily step on a small mouse. Sengoku nodded. Although he was also very puzzled, he did not ask much. Anyway, the main thing is to catch Crocodile, the mastermind. Catch him? It's better to send him to hell. That eyesore of a fly should have died more than 10 years ago. With a cold mist on his face, Dustless has decided to kill Crocodile directly. He will definitely die. If he is handed over to Sengoku, he may make a boring public execution. Chapter 717. Crocodile painstakingly looked for Pluto to deal with Dustless. For such an ambitious enemy, Dustless used to let him live for more than 10 years. Now that the time has come, he will never tolerate him. I promise to complete the task. Saluting Sengoku, Dustless smiled and promised. When Sengoku saw this scene, he felt strange. He didn't know why, but he always had a strange feeling in his heart. Not only Sengoku but other marine generals also stared at Dustless. They always felt that his words were insinuating and had other meanings. After a few words of greetings, the hours-long meeting ended. Time flies, and in a blink of an eye, 3 days passed. Although Sengoku asked to arrest Crocodile as soon as possible, it was easier said than done. The journey to Alabasta alone took 7 days. Moreover, due to Wu Chen's deliberate procrastination, he still hadn't left the military headquarters even after 3 consecutive days. Is your justice so sluggish? How dare you? On the seaside of Marin, Dustless leisurely basked in the sun. His personal maid Hancock also followed this time, standing quietly beside Dustless, waiting for orders. A group of marine bosses stood around, staring at Dustless with dissatisfaction. This guy has been basking in the sun for 3 days and even brought his maid. Where did he come to perform a task? Obviously he came to show off his superior life. The hot-tempered Akainu couldn't hold back his temper. Although he had been beaten by Dustless, he couldn't help but ask, "Your justice is too slow. In that case, let me deal with Crocodile." Dustless glanced at him faintly, then took the goblet handed by Hancock and drank the red liquid in the cup. "I'm waiting." Dustless stared deeply into the void in the distance and whispered, "Waiting." Hearing this, all the Marines were stunned and looked at Dustless. Dustless was too lazy to explain to this group of people. He closed his eyes and leisurely basked in the sun. Luffy and Crocodile were already fighting. He just needed to pick up the ready-made Crocodile. He couldn't run away anyway. In just 3 days after the debut of Uchiha Madara and the 500 million berries bounty on his head, another piece of news that shook the world came out. Crocodile was removed from the title of 7 Warlords of the Sea. Everywhere in the 4 seas as well as the New World were extremely shocked. The Marines seemed to have been injected with chicken blood in the past 2 days, and all kinds of actions were confusing. Alabasta, the sky was filled with yellow sand. Because of Crocodile's secret interference, the Miracle City, which was originally born in the desert, was filled with wind and sand. It was a scene of doomsday, full of desolation. On the city wall, a tall man with a cigar in his mouth, his eyes were deeply sunken, his face was full of vicissitudes. He was wearing a black trench coat and there was a scar on his face. "President, it seems that our goal has been exposed. It is better to retreat temporarily." Next to Crocodile, a slender young woman suggested. Looking closely, it was Nico Robin, but because Crocodile's back was to her, he didn't see the contempt and disapproval in Robin's eyes. Crocodile was unmoved. Now that he has been exposed and the title of 7 Warlords of the Sea has been exploited, he can't give up the current plan. That man, Her eyes were empty and Dustless's back appeared indifferently in her mind. Robin's eyes were full of unshakable firmness. She secretly said in her heart, "He will be able to bring my mother back to life." Wandering in the outside world for many years, Robin has been performing tasks according to Dustless's instructions more than 10 years ago, and every time she can turn danger into safety. It's like God can predict the future. Thinking of Dustless's incredible prediction ability, which was almost 100% accurate, Robin's heart was beating uncontrollably with a thump-thump-thump sound. Her breasts were also undulating. If you can predict the future, then it must not be difficult to bring the dead back to life. Her eyes were full of fanatical flames. At this moment Robin's temperament was particularly hot. Even Crocodile was affected. He suddenly turned around and looked at Robin in surprise. "What's wrong?" Hearing this, Robin was stunned and then instantly restored her former calmness. "I think it won't take long for my dream to come true, so I'm happy." "Yes." Crocodile's eyes also glowed from blankness, looking at the distant sky with strong confidence. It's just that he didn't catch the fleeting sarcasm in Robin's eyes. In the dark, Crocodile seems to have dreamed of controlling ancient weapons and sweeping the world. Of course, there is also Dustless's appearance of fleeing. Rubber pistol. At this moment, with a loud shout, a fist rose from the ground, extended without limit, and smashed directly from the bottom of the tower. "That kid is not dead yet, forget it, it's not too late to kill you this time." Crocodile looked down at Luffy and others under the tower with a contemptuous smile at the corner of his mouth. Looking at the incoming fist, he was even more disdainful. "I can elementalize. How can this kind of casual attack be possible?" The arrogant laughter didn't stop and Crocodile was ruthlessly smashed. Looking closely, Luffy's rubber fist was dripping with water.